Hello everyone, welcome to this video. This tutorial is a Python full course where we are going to be learning Python programming from scratch. So this is a list of everything we're going to be talking about in this video. So let me give a brief introduction to Python. So Python is one of the fastest growing programming languages in the world. With Python, you can go into various fields like machine learning and AI, web development, and plenty others. So taking to learn this course and choosing to learn Python is a very good decision for your programming journey. So without wasting any time, let's get straight into the tutorial. So right here, I'm just on my browser. So we're going to download Python on our laptop. So to do this, I'm just going to search for download Python for Windows, since I'm on a Windows. And then I'm going to click on the first link. And then right here, I see download Python 3.9.1, which is the latest version. So I'm just going to click on it. And then you can see here that it's downloaded it automatically. So I already have Python downloaded now. What I just need to do is to install it. So I'm just going to come into where I saved it. And then I'm going to run it. So make sure that when you are installing Python, you must tick this add Python to path. If not, you're just going to make it more complex than it's supposed to be for you. So let's click install now. Yes. And so this is just going to install Python on our machine. It should take a couple of minutes to install. And I'm going to be back when it's installed finish. So right now the setup was successful. So as you can see, the installation has been done. So I can just click on close. Now for me to confirm if I have Python installed, I'm going to open up my command prompt. So here in my command prompt, I'm just going to type Python. Once I type it, you should open up this shell. You might not understand what all this is now, but this is just to verify if Python was truly installed. So now that we know we have Python installed, let's just go ahead and install our code editor. So Python is the programming language, but where we're going to code, where we're going to program everything, or the Python we're going to do is going to be in a code editor. And there are various code editors out there. We have Visual Studio Code, we have PyCharm, we have Sublime Text, we have Atom. There are countless out there, but for this tutorial we're going to be using Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and download it. So I can close up my command prompt right now. So let me just say that if you don't know how to get to your command prompt, you can just search for it on your Windows search bar. So right here, we can just go back to Google and then we can search for, let's say, download Visual Studio Code. And I'll just click on the first one. So since I'm on a Windows, I'm going to download the one for Windows. If you're on Ubuntu or Linux or Mac, download the one for your OS. So right now you can see that it is downloading. So I already have it downloaded. I have it on my PC. I'm just going to cancel that since I already have it downloaded. Let me just show you the installation process. So right here, I have it downloaded already. We just click on enter. That's to run it. So what it tells me here is that setup has detected that Visual Studio Code is running. So this simply means that I already have Visual Studio Code installed on my computer. So I'm just going to press cancel. But for you as a beginner, you want to install this as a new software. So when we already have this installed, we're just going to open up our Visual Studio Code. And this is what it should look like once you first open it up. So now we have everything set up. We downloaded Python and installed it, and then we downloaded Visual Studio Code and installed it. Now we can go straight into coding. So now that we have everything installed, what we just want to do is to create a new file. In this file is where we're going to code all our Python. So in Visual Studio Code, we're just going to come into the toolbar and click on new file. So once we click on new file, you can see it automatically has this untitled name, but we want to save it by pressing Ctrl S and I'm just gonna save it. First of all, let me say all files, and then I want to save it as app.py. So the name of the file is app, but at the bottom at the file extension I used .py. So anytime we're working with Python, anytime we want to create a new Python file, it must always have the extension .py. That will make whatever we're running on know that we are using a Python file. So now once I save it, it's updated here, and as you can see, Visual Studio Code automatically detects the logo of Python. Now that's how to create and save a new Python file. So this is basically how everything looks like in Visual Studio Code. On the left hand bar, we have a folder bar. That's where if we are opening a folder, this is where we're gonna see all the files and folders in there. We have this search, this GitHub. We don't need to bother about that for now, but this is how Visual Studio Code looks like. So since we have everything, we know how to create a new file, what we want to talk about now is the print function. So in Python, we have some built-in functions. That means some things that are already done automatically, which we don't need to write too much of code. Now let's say we just want to print text to the screen, like we just want to show a user like hello world or welcome. We're going to use the print function. You're just going to print a basic text to the screen. Now for us to do this, we're going to say print, and then we're going to open parentheses, and then we can use single quotes or we can also use double quotes. There is no problem here in Python, but we can just go with single quotes. So you can just pick one and go with that. So in this code, I'm going to write my text. Now I can say hello world. Now as you can see, I have printed hello world, and I must make sure I save this file. And then for me to run this Python file, for me to see the output of my code, I'm going to have to come to the right hand corner right here and click on run. Now once I click on run, you see that it opens a new terminal automatically, and our code is going to be run in this terminal. So if you just wait a second, we're going to see the output of this code. You can see right here that we have hello world. Automatically it prints hello world. If I say hello world welcome and I run it, you see it changes and it says hello world welcome. So that's how to run a Python file. Now let's talk about some more features about this print function. Now let's say we want to print on a new line like hello world, and we want this welcome to be on another line. We can easily do that. We can just remove this, and then on a new line we're just gonna print welcome. Exactly the same thing. Now once I run it, you can see it says hello world down here and it says welcome. So that's how to print on a new line. We can also do a lot of things. Let's say we want to add another value to this hello world, like let's print a sentence. Let's say my name is Tomi, and then I want to say my age is, then I can add a comma right here and say 100. So this will automatically tell Python that this is a number and it's no more a string, just a normal character. So now once I run it, you're gonna see it says my name is Tomi, my name is 100, with no errors. And automatically you see that it leaves a space right here. Right here we didn't leave a space, but automatically once we put this number here, it leaves a space. To clarify that, if I put don't leave no space and I run it, you see that the space is still there. So that's just a smart feature of Python. So I think that's gonna be all for the print function. Now let's talk about variables in Python. As you can see here, I have 3 print functions. The first one says Tim is a boy, the second one says Tim is 18, and the third one says Tim is from Turkey. So as you can see in the 3 print functions, I'm repeating Tim 3 times. Now we can use variables instead of repeating a particular text. Now variables are just basically saving a data in the memory of Python, and then we can get that data back by referencing its name. So let's see this in action. Let's say above the code, I have a variable named name. So this name is the name of the variable, and I'm saying equals to, I put single quotes, and the name is Tim. So name is the name of the variable, and Tim is the value assigned to this name. So like this, we've saved this variable up here. So we can print that variable. Once we say print, whenever we are printing a variable, we don't put quotes like we do when we are printing a normal string. So we can remove the quotes and just type the name of the variable, which is name. So now when I run this, you are going to see it prints all this, and on the 4th line it prints Tim. It didn't print name. Now this is what variable is about. It's just basically saving a particular data and then referencing it through the variable name. So now instead of saying Tim 3 times, we can just replace this Tim with name. And for us to do this, right here you see we printed only the variable and we didn't have quotes. But right here we are printing string with quotes, and we also want to print the variable with it. So this is called concatenation. We're going to join the variable and the normal string together. To do this, let's remove Tim, and we're going to say name, which is the name of the variable, plus the remaining text. Now once we say name plus is a boy, it's going to print us Tim is a boy. So we can also do the same right here. We just simply remove Tim and we say name plus is 18. We do the same for the 3rd line. We say name plus is from Turkey. Now once we print this, you can see it says Tim is a boy, Tim is 18, Tim is from Turkey. But right here we said name. So that's what variable is about. So let's just type CLS to close this up. But variable is more broad than just this. So there's something we call data types. Now as you can see, this is just Tim. Tim is letter, is a character, and that is a string. So string are basically just characters. Now string is a data type. We have, if this is a number like 23, is no more a string, is now an integer. We have boolean, which is for true or false values, and others. But for this tutorial, we're just going to be particular about maybe 2 or 3. So now if I want to, let me just undo that. Let me specify a new variable and name it age. Now this variable, I want it to be the age, and let's give it 18. So whenever we are using an integer or a number, we don't add quotes when we are assigning the variable. You see right here we added quotes, and inside that quote we put Tim. But for it to be an integer, you will see that we do not add quotes. If I hover on this, you see that it says 18 is int, which stands for integer. And then Tim right here is a string. So now we can just join this by saying plus age. Now once we print that, it's still gonna give us, okay. So you can see now that it says can only concatenate string, not integer. So now there's a problem with Python. Anytime we want to concatenate a string with a variable, it doesn't, an integer with a string, it doesn't work. So we can just solve this. Instead of using this, we can say comma age. Once we print this, you can see it says Tim is from Turkey. So let me close this up. Right here, we can see anytime we're concatenating with a string, it's possible. But when we are dealing with an integer, we can't use this plus. We have to use comma. And we can also use comma when concatenating with a string also. So this is the two things. We can use addition sign with only string, and then we can use comma with string and integer. So if I run it, it's still gonna work. Team is 18. Now that's basically how to concatenate and join strings with variables. Now we're going to be talking more about strings. So strings are just plain text. So if I print something like print I, this is a string. String are just plain text. Now we're going to talk more about the features of strings, different things you can do with strings. Now let's say I say I put a full stop. How are you? Now once I run this, you see that it runs it on the same line, which is I, how are you? But if I want this to be on another line without inputting another print function, I can just simply use a backslash n. This is a backslash n. Now this is gonna automatically take this to a new line. It's just like a break. It's gonna add a break in between this and this. So now once I run it, you're gonna see it says I, how are you? But we have this space here because of this. If I cancel that and I run it again, you're gonna see we have I, how are you? So we can also print string as a variable. So let's say we have something named name and the name is Tim. So this is a string, it's a variable, but a string type of variable. And then in print function, we can also print that string variable by just saying print name without quotes. Once we print it, you're gonna see right here we have Tim printed. So let's just close this up. So if we come up here, we can also print, let's say we want to add a double quote or single quote. Now you know we can't add a single quote in between our text. That's because Python is going to see this like we want to close up this print text. So for us to add a double quote, we can just easily add a backslash then the quote. Now once you have a backslash and that quote, this quote is going to be printed. Once I run it, you see now we have I with this quote, how are you? So if you want to print special characters, we use the backslash. Or you can just print the backslash alone. It's gonna work. So you can see the backslash is there. So we can use the backslash to break, to make it on a new line. We can also use the backslash to add a quote, and then we can print the backslash just like that. Now let me talk to you about special functions on strings. So functions in Python is just a block of code which does a particular task. So in this string has a lot of function which does different things. Let's say we want to convert all the characters in this to uppercase. We can use a string function, or we want to check if it's lowercase, or want to get only the first letter or the second. Those are functions in Python. So now we can just say we want to get only the first letter. Now if we want to get the first letter, we can just easily do something like print name, the square bracket, and 0. Now 0 represents the first letter. If I say 1, it represents the second letter. If I say 2, it represents the third letter. So in Python, or in programming in general, numbers start counting from 0. So once I put 0 and then run it, down here you see it prints only T. Now let me run 2, which is the third one. You see it prints only M. And if I run what is not there, like 0, 1, 2, if I try to run 3, it's gonna give us an error, index error. So you can see string index out of range, which means it's not present there. Now we can also do multiple things. Let's say we want to convert this all to uppercase. We can just do name dot uppercase. Now once we run this, it says has no attributes uppercase. So sometimes we can run into error. We just change it. So I think it's because there's not supposed to be case. So name.upper is the function that changes it to uppercase. So once I run it, you see now that we have team in uppercase. We can also do the same thing with lower. We just say name.lower and then we run it. Now you can see that everything is being changed to a lowercase. Now once we come back here, we can also check if everything which is present here is uppercase or if all the characters are lowercase. So for us to do that, we're just gonna say name.isLower. So once I run it, you see it says false. So it's gonna give me a true or false response. If everything is uppercase, it's gonna give me false. But if it's lower, it's gonna give me true. So you can see, since there is an uppercase T here, I asked if it's lower and it says false. But if I ask if it is upper and run it, it still says false. That's simply because there is uppercase and there's lowercase. Not everything is upper or lower. But if I change it to a lowercase, let me change everything to upper, TIM, and then I run it, you can see now it says true because everything is uppercase. And then we can also join different functions together. Now you can see if I say something like is lower and I run it, it says false. But I can first of all convert it to lowercase, then ask if it's lower. So I can do dot lower and then run. You see now it says true, but it's uppercase. So first of all, it says name.lower, which means convert it to lowercase. Then it checks if it's lowercase, it gives us true. So that's basically how to just join different or add different functions together. And then we can also do something else by, let's say we want to get the amount of characters we have in this variable. To do that, we can say len, then we open a bracket and close it. When we run this, you can see it gives us 3 because we have 1, 2, 3. If I have a lot and then I run it, it's gonna give me 18, the number which we have in there. So that's how to get the length of a string. But let me just undo that. But let's say we want to find where a particular text is. So this is I. Let's say we want to get the index number of I. As we know, this is 0 and 1. So this I is index number is 1. If we want to get it, we're just gonna say len. We're gonna remove len. So we're gonna say name dot index, and then we're gonna say I. So now it's gonna print me 1 because that's the index number of I. Once I run it, you see it prints me 1, which is the index number. Now let's say we want to replace a text. Let's say where we have M, we want to replace it with T. So we can easily do that. What we're just gonna say is name.replace. I'm gonna open a bracket, parenthesis, then the text to replace, we want to replace M, we're gonna put M, and then what we just want to do is comma, and then what we want to replace it with, we want to replace it with T. So now once I run this, you can see it's print TIT. So that is replacing this M with T. So that's basically how to replace. So there are also a lot of functions, a lot of string functions, but these are just some I showed you and how to use them. So that's gonna be all for strings. In this part, we're going to be talking about numbers in Python. So to print a number in Python is pretty easy. We just type print and then we just go ahead and type the number 78. Now once we just run it, you'll see that it prints 78. So we don't need to add any syntax or anything. We just print 78 and it gives us 78. Now we can also specify a number as a variable. We can say no, the number is equals to 79. We just write it like that. We don't need to add this. And then we can print number. So once we run it, it gives us 78 and 79. Now we can also add numbers. So let me just remove this. So instead of just printing 78, we can print 78 plus 22. Now we can add a number. We can perform arithmetic operations. Once I run it, you see that it gives me 100. It automatically adds these two numbers or integers together and then it runs it. I can also try this with a decimal number. Let's say 0.7 and this. Then once I run it, you see it gives me 100.934. So that is how numbers work. And we can also test it out with the subtraction. You see it gives us 55.066. And then we can test it out with the division. It gives us the answer. And then we can also test it out with the multiplication. When we run it, it gives us the answer. So that's basically basic arithmetic operation with Python. But we can go further, just where we did with strings. We can go further and use the built-in number functions. So let's say we want to show the remainder of a division. So let's say something like 20 divided by 6. Now you know that this will give us 3 remainder 2. So it's gonna give us 3 remainder all of these. But what if we just only want to get the remainder? We don't want to get the main answer. We can just do 20 percentage sign 6. Once I run it, you see it gives me 2, which is the remainder. Now that's how to get the remainder of a division. We can also convert a number to a string. Now let me show you. Let's say we have this variable. We have this variable named number equals to 55. You can see that it's a number, an integer right here. Then I can specify a new variable. I can name it number 2. And I want this number 2 to be a string. So I'm going to say string of number variable. So now if I over on this number 2, you're going to see that it's a string. When I print number 2, it's going to print 55, but now it's a string. It's 55 also, but it's a string. So how do we know if it's really a string? Remember that when concatenating, you can't concatenate numbers, but you can concatenate with string. So let's try to concatenate. So right here, let's say number is, let's try to concatenate with the main number. So let's say add number, and let's run it. You see it gives us an error, can only concatenate string, not integer. So but now that we've converted it, let's try to concatenate with num2. Once we run it, you see now it gives us number is 55. So that's to show that it has converted that integer or that number to a string. Now Python sees that as a string. This is also very useful in a lot of cases. So that's that. And then we can also get the absolute value of a number. So let's say, let's just cancel all this. Let's print -5. Now obviously when we print this, it should give us -5, as you can see down here. Let me just close this up. But if I want it to print only 5 regardless of the sign, if it's positive or negative, I'm going to add ABS. Now this is a function, it's a number function. As I explained earlier, function is just a block of code which does a particular task. Now we can write a function manually by ourselves, but Python has some built-in function which we can automatically use. That's why when we use ABS, it automatically sees it as a Python function. Now this ABS means absolute. That's the full meaning of ABS. So it's going to get the absolute value of this number. Now when I run it, you see it prints only 5, regardless of this negative sign beside it. So we have 4 and 2. So now you know that 4 is obviously greater than 2. So once I print this, it's gonna give me 4. This is showing the highest number of this. So that means 4 raised to power 2. Not 4 raised to power 2, sorry about that. This means we have these two numbers. Max is gonna get the highest number. So let's say we have another number named 3. Once I run it, it still prints 4 because 4 is greater than all of these. But now what if I have 16? Once I run it, it gives me 16 because 16 is the highest number in this range of numbers. I can also do the same to get the minimum amount of numbers. I can say min, so that is going to automatically print 2 because that's the minimum. So once I run it, you see it prints 2. So that's the basic way of getting the maximum and the minimum. And then we can also round a number too. So we can estimate a number. So you know, in normal mathematics, if we have something like 3.2, this is estimated to 3. But if we have something like 3.5, this is estimated to 4. We can also do this here in Python. For us to do this, we just say round. If we round 3.2, it's gonna give us 3. But once we round 3.5, it's gonna give us 4. Just normal estimation rounding off to a number. And then we also have one which is bin. Let's see bin. So what this bin does is that it converts a particular number to a binary string. Now if you know binary numbers, is this weird type of text. So each number has its binary string. So if you want to get the binary string of a number, you just run it and it prints this. Now let's run something like 334. It prints the binary string for 334. Now that is some basic functions, but there are countless functions for countless number functions. So all these, we're not able to access them because they are already built in Python. But there are still more that we can't access except we import. Now there's something in Python called import. Now we have more number functions. The one that can be able to find the square root, the one that can get the power, various are countless. So now the reason why we can't access those ones because we haven't imported them. The ones I just show you, we can use them without importing. But the ones I want to show you now, we need to import them from the Python math function before we can use it. So for us to import, we're going to say from math, something like this, import all. But instead of writing all, we write asterisk. So what this is doing is saying from the math class or the math function, import everything which is there. Now in this math class or function, there might be the one that can find square roots, there might be the one that can find the power, everything. So we don't know the one we want yet, so we're just importing everything with this asterisk. So now we can, since we have this imported, we can find the square root. Now we can just say square root of, let's do something like 100. And once we run this, it should give us 10. As you can see, it gives us 10. It added this 0.0. It's okay, but now it gives us 10. So that's gonna be all about working with numbers. So in this part, we're gonna be getting users input. So what we're gonna be doing is to tell a user to input a text, and then we're gonna save that text in a variable, and then we're gonna tell the user what he input. So let's go ahead and practicalize that. So to use an input in Python, it's pretty easy. We're just gonna say input, then open and close parentheses. Now in this open and close parentheses, we're going to ask the user what we want to input. So we're going to put the quotes, and in that quote we're going to say, let's say something like input your name. So now this is going to tell the user to input your name, and then once the user type in something like Tim or Tomi or John, anything the users type, we want to save it in this variable called name. So now this variable called name is going to be the input. So now let's try that. We run it. You see now the first thing it says is input your name. Let me say Tomi, and I click enter. So nothing happened, but that's how to use an input. So let's just close. We can come back here and just simply print to the user name. So let's run it. Once the user inputs name and say Tim, you see that it just prints Tim. So we can make this more interactive by asking for the user's name and maybe asking for the user's age, and then telling the user your name is this and your age is this. So we need to have two variables. The second one will be age. So name equals input your name, and then age would be equals input your age. So what we always want to print is your name is, and then we just want to add the name, and then we close that, and then we say and you are the age years old. Now when we run this, it says input your name. Let me say John, and is 105 years old. So it says your name is John and you are 105 years old. So this is basically how to just collect simple data from the user and then use it the way you want. Tell the user your name is this, your age is this. So this is the basic concept. You can also link it with how they do websites, like when you create or sign up to a website, and then they save that your name, your email and everything in the database, and they later tell you welcome John or welcome whatever your name is. So just we can link that concept. It's basically just getting a user input and then storing it as a variable, in this case as a data, and then we can print it to the user back. So that's all you need to know about getting users input. But we can also make it more fun. Now when we get a user input, you can see that the age is seen as a string. Right here you see age is string, but we want the age to be integer. So we can convert this string into an integer. So for us to do this, we're going to say int, we open the bracket and then we close the bracket. So everything is inside this integer function. If I come back here, you see now that it has been changed to integer, no more string. But now if we try to run this, I input my name and I input a random age. You can now see it gives us this error, can only concatenate string, not integer. So for us to be able to add age, you know what we need to do? We need to either convert it to a string, which we don't want to do, or we can just use comma. So let's just remove this and then let's run it. So let's input a random age right here, random name and age. So now you see it works. It says your name is John and you are 13. Now that's how to basically just get user input, use it how you want, and then you can pass the information back to the user. In this part, we're going to be doing a simple Python exercise. So what we're going to be doing is a simple word replacement program. So what is going to be happening is that a user is going to input a sentence, and then let's say a user wants to change a word in that sentence or change something in that sentence, then we're going to allow the user to be able to do that. So if a user inputs a sentence like I am a boy, and he later wants to change that boy to, let's say, a guy or something else, so that's what we simply want to do. So we're going to ask the user for 3 inputs. The first input will be the sentence, the second input is going to be what the user wants to change, and then the third input is what the user wants to replace it with. So let's get that and practicalize it. Now the first thing we're going to do is just to have those variables. So let's first have a variable named sentence, and I want this variable to be an input, and then I'll just say enter your sentence. Now let me just print the sentence to the user. Let's run it. Now let's say the sentence is I am a boy, and it just simply prints that sentence. We can come back here. Let's just say your sentence is I am a boy, which is gonna be whatever the user writes. So then what we now want to do is to have another variable. Let's say word1. It should be an input. Now this variable is the word the user wants to remove or replace, and then we can say enter word to replace. Let's say the word to replace, and then once we have that, it's going to be stored in this variable named word1, and then we're also going to have another variable. Let's name it word2. This is going to be what the user wants to replace it with. So let's say enter the word to replace it with. So now once we have all this, we're just gonna print sentence dot replace. That means we want to replace this with this. Open a bracket to take 2 inputs, which is word1, the word we want to replace, and then word2, what we want to replace it with. So what this is doing is that, let's say we have a sentence named I am a boy, then this word1 is the boy we want to change, and then word2 is what we want to replace it with. So let's just go ahead and test it. So right here is running. Okay, it gives us invalid syntax. That's because we forgot to add a plus right here. Now let's do that again. Right here you can see it says enter your sentence. Now let me say I am a boy. Now it prints us your sentence is I am a boy, and it says enter the word to replace. So I want to replace this boy and enter the word to replace it with. I want to replace it with dude. Now you see it prints I am a dude. So that's basically how to do a simple word replacement exercise. It takes in an input, which is a sentence, and then it takes us another input, which is what we want to replace, and then the third one is what we want to replace it with, and then it basically just prints that to the screen. So I hope you understood what we did in this part. If you didn't, you can just go back and watch this part again and then make sure you understand before moving to the next one. So in this part, we're going to be talking about working with lists in Python. So when you're working in Python, you're going to be dealing with a lot of data and you want to be able to know how to fix your data into a list. So a list in Python is basically just a list of different attributes of different values fixed into a variable. So let's just dive straight into the practical. Now to define a list is similar to defining a variable. So we can just give it a name of a list. Let's say a list of countries, and I can name the list countries. And I'll just use the equal sign and the square brackets. When we are defining lists, we need to use a square bracket. And I can just give it some inputs like United Kingdom. And I can also give it another list like say Ghana, and let me say Nigeria. Let me give it one more value, and I can say Australia. So now this list, a list variable, it has 4 values. So now once I print the list like this, I'll just say print and I'll give it countries, which is a list. You see that it just prints me the whole list the way it is right here. So that's basically the main thing you need to know when defining a list. But list is more broad than this. There are lots we can do with lists. Like let's say I just want to get the first attribute. Now each list has their index number. Like this is 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. Just the way I said earlier in this tutorial that in Python or in programming general, numbers start counting from 0. So the index number of this value is 0, 1, 2, 3. It's just similar to when we have a variable. Let's say we have a variable named name and we have Tomi. So this has an index of 0, 1, 2, 3. Now that's very similar to a list. Each value has an index of 0, 1, 2, 3. Now we can just delete that. Now let's say we only want to print this. We don't want to print the whole list. I can just do it like this. Countries with square brackets, and I'll fix in the index number in between those square brackets. Now when I run this, you see now that it prints me only United Kingdom. I can also do the same thing. Let's say I want to print Nigeria. I give it 2. I run it. Now you see that we have Nigeria. There are a lot of things we can do. Now let's say once we get this, we just want to print only n from it. We can also do that. So after saying countries index number 2, we can specify another index number saying 0. So once I run it, you see it prints me n. Now what does this mean? It says countries get the value with the index number 2, 0, 1, 2. So now it has Nigeria. And then I say from that Nigeria gets me the one with the index number 0. And then we see in Nigeria, n has the index number 0. So that's basically how to just add some simple things in Python lists. Now let's say we just want to get only all the lists from Ghana to the end. We don't want to add United Kingdom, or we just want to get the list from Nigeria to the end. We can also do that. So we just say countries. If we want to get from Ghana to the end, we can just say our square bracket 1 and a column. Now this is gonna get everything from index number 1 till the end. Now let's make sure we close this. When I run it, you see now it gives me the list without United Kingdom. That's how to just get it from a particular index number to the end. We can also do the same thing. We can say from 2, you'll see that it gives me from Nigeria to Australia. Right here, Nigeria and Australia. Now I can also specify a range. Let's say I only want to get the list from 1 to 2. Okay, let me add one more value here. let me say New Zealand. Yeah, so right here I said New Zealand, and this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I only want to get from 1 to 3. I don't want the last one, and I don't want this. I can easily do that. I'll say from 1, which is from Ghana, index number 1. Then after the column, I'll say 3. So 1, 2, 3. Once I run that, you see, okay, it gives me Ghana and Nigeria. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's say to 4. And when I run this, it gives me Ghana, Nigeria, and Australia. So it gives me from here all the way to 3. So this is basically going to get from 1, which we started, to the one before which we end. So that's how to do that in Python. And then we can also get the type of the list. Now if I print something like type countries, now it's going to print to me that this is a list down here. So let me just quickly type CLS to clear everything I've done. Now let me print it. You see it says class lists. So this is showing me that this variable type is a list. Now if it's just a normal variable, let's say a string variable, it's also going to show me that it is a string. Now let's try that. Let's just divert from list for a second, and let's say we have name, Tomi, and I say the type of name. When I run it, you see down here it says a string. If I change this to 12, you see down here it says integer. So that's how to get the type of a particular variable. So that's how we know now that this is a list variable. Now I can just simply delete that. And then let's say I want to change the value of one value in this list. Now let's say I want to change this from United Kingdom to United States. So what I'm just going to do is to just say countries 0, because the index number of United Kingdom is 0, should now be equals to United States. And then let me just add a print. Let me print countries. Now when I print countries, okay, you see name is not defined. That's because we've removed this variable that was called name. So let's just remove this line and run it again. You see now the first value is now United States. Meanwhile, it's United Kingdom right here. But that's simply because we changed it to United States here. We can also do it again. Let's say we want to change Australia, which is the third. We'll say 3. And let's say we want to change Australia to a country like Canada. And when I run it, you see we have United States, Ghana, Nigeria. We don't have Australia again, it's now Canada, and then we have New Zealand. So that's how to change a particular value in a list. Now let's say we want to get only the end of this list. You know, we can also get it by just, let me just quickly delete all this. We can get New Zealand by just typing countries with its index number, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. New Zealand index number is 4. If I type 4 and run it, it gives me New Zealand. But I can also do it in another way. Now if I add a negative sign right here, let me delete this, and I say 1. Now this is gonna get the list from the last value in that list. Now if I run this, you see it gives me New Zealand. If I say -2, -2 is obviously Australia. If I run this now, you see we have Australia. So note that when you're using a negative sign, it gets you that list from the last, from the bottom basically. But you note that from the beginning, we use 0 for the first, and then when we're starting for the last, we use -1. Yeah, that's because, as we know in normal math, 0 is neither negative nor positive. So when we start from the back, we use -1, not -0. So when we start from the front, it's 0. When we start from the back, it's -1. So that's how to basically use that. Now there are also a lot of other things we can do with list. Like we can get the length of this list. Now let's say we want to get how many values we have in this list, because most of the times you have large amount of data, can't start counting them one by one like this, but you can just say len countries, which is the name of the list. Now once I run it, you see it gives me 5, which is because I have 5 values in here. But note that when it gives me the answer, it doesn't give me based on index value. Now index value is just like the ID assigned to each of these values right here. But when I calculate the length, it gives me the actual amount we have here, which is 5. But if I'm to calculate it from the index number, it will be 4. I hope you understand that. We can also do some other things, like in a list. As you can see, all of these are strings. Now instead of printing strings, let me just delete this New Zealand. Instead of printing only strings, I can change, let's say this Ghana, I can change it to a number like 2. So now we have a string, we have an integer. If I print this, okay, this gives me 4, so let me remove length. Once I print this, you see it still gives me what I want to see. If I print the index number of this, which is 1, and I press run, it still gives me 2. So we can mix different data types in a list. I can also change this Nigeria to true, which is a Boolean value. Once I run it, let's remove this. I run this, it still gives me that. So there is not going to be error, nothing is going to conflict. We can just easily do that. And you remember that we checked the type of a list. So right here, once I run this, you see that it gives me class list, which means this variable is a list. But let's say I want to check the type of the values in a list. Like I want to check the type of this value or the type of this value. Now, as you know, this value is a string. This is an integer. This is a Boolean value. This is also a string. Let me overrun it. You see it gives me int, which is integer. And once I overrun this, let me see. Okay, it doesn't give me anything there, but this is a Boolean value. And this is a string. So let's say I want to get this. I'll just say type countries, square brackets, and I give it its index number. Now when I run this, you see it says class is a string. Let's say I want to get for the second one, which has an index value of 1. Once I run it, it gives me integer. Let's try for the third one. It gives me bool, which means Boolean. So that's how to basically get the type of a string. And we can also do some other things, like let's say the last thing I want to show you for this part is another way to define a string, or let me say to assign a string. I mean a list, sorry. So instead of using these square brackets, we can also use something we call lists. But now when we are using this list constructor, it's called a list constructor. It is used to construct a list. We aren't going to use square brackets again. We're going to use normal round brackets like this. But now, so let me just delete this line. Now let's use the list constructor to specify or to construct a new list. So I'll say list, and I'm going to use normal brackets, parentheses, and it has to be double. So when I'm using the list constructor, it has to be double like this. Now in here, I can have all my values like Nigeria. I can have 34. I can have false. And once I print this, okay, we don't want to print type, we just want to print everything. Countries. Now you see it gives me everything which I want to see. So that's how to basically use the list constructor to specify a list. So we can print a list in two ways: the normal the second list constructor, and then we can also print with the normal way without list, like the square brackets like this. Let me say countries 2. So now if I say type, print the type of countries, you see it's gonna give me list. And then let me also print the type of countries too, just to show that both of them are still a list. So list and list. So that will be all about the basics of list. In the next video, we're going to talk more about list attributes. There's still a lot of things we can do with lists. In this part, we're going to be talking more on lists. Specifically, we're going to be talking about list functions or list methods in Python. So in the last part, I showed you about lists and plenty things you can do with lists, plenty list attributes. In this video, we're going to dive more deeper. Now, let's say we have two lists. The first one is list 1. And this list 1 is just a bunch of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have list 2. And then we want this list 2 to just be, let's say, a bunch of fruits. So we have banana, and then we have apples, mangoes, and then let's say oranges. So now we have these two lists. Now let's say we want to join these two lists together, like we want to print it together. We are going to do something like list 1 dot append dot extend. We want to extend it with list 2. Now once I print list 1, what this is going to give me is this joined with this. So let's print it. Right here, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then banana, apple, mango, oranges. So you just give me this joined with this. The first list joined with the second list. So that's what extend does. It combines the two lists together. But let's say we want to add a value to the ending of this list, like oranges. We want to add, what other one do we have? I think we have cherries, but we just want to add something else to these. We can do something like list 2 dot append, and then what do we want to append to it? Let me say cherry. Now once I print list 2, it's gonna print me all these with cherry. Now cherry is part of this list. You see now that it prints me bananas, apples, mangoes, oranges, and it prints me cherry. Now if I say I want to get the length of list 2, now we have 4 here, but since we appended 1, it should give us 5. Now you see we have 5. So that's just it's a simple way to append a value to a list, and it might be very useful also. But let's say we want to put in a value in between one of these, like we want to put in a value in between banana and apple. This cherry, we want it to be right here, something like this. Now if we want to do that, we're just gonna say list2 dot insert, and then this is gonna take 2 inputs. Now it's gonna take the index number, the index place we want to put it in 1, and then what we want to put there is cherry. Now let me explain this further. So it says list2 dot insert. We want to say in the index number 1, that means right here, then cherry should be right here, so 0, 1. We want it to be here. We want to input cherry. Now when I print cherry, let me just run this. You see now we have banana, then we have cherry in between. So in between bananas and apples, we have cherry. So that is how to insert a value in between a list. But now let's say we want to remove a particular value from that list. We can say list2 dot remove, and let's just remove bananas. Now once I print list2, it's gonna print me list2 without bananas. Now that's very easy. It's just by saying remove, then whatever you want to remove. But now let's say we want to do something like we want to delete everything in this list, we want to clear it up. We can just say list2.clear, and nothing is gonna be in here. Once I say list2.clear, this is gonna be empty. It's just gonna be an empty list. It clears everything, deletes all the values in there. Once I run it, you see now that it prints me an empty list. So that's how to just delete a list. Very easy. But now let's say that we have these values, and then mango, we want to get the index number of mango. As we know, this is 0, 1, 2. So the index number of mango is 2. But we want to get it. Let's say we have thousands of values in this list, and we want to get where the mango is located in that list. We're just gonna say print list2 dot index of mango. So you're just gonna print the index number of mango. Let's just run it. Right here you see it says 2, 0, 1, 2. So it tells me where mango is located in this list, which is very, very helpful. Now let's say we have a value appearing more than once, or we just want to know how many times the value appears in this list. Now it's very easy. What we're just gonna say is list.count mango. So now it should tell us 1, because mango only comes in this list one time. Once I run it, you see here we have 1. Let me come here and input mango again. Now once I run it this time, you see that we have 2, because mango is in our list 2 times. So that's how to simply do that. But now let's say we have a list of numbers, and let's say they are scattered. Like let's say we have 1 here, and let me just delete all these. We have 4, 5. Let's say we have 3 here. So 4, 3, 5, 1. And let's have 2 at the end. So let's say we want to print this list in ascending order. You know, as I said, in Python, you might be working with a lot of data, and we have thousands of numbers that are scattered, and we want to print them accordingly. Let's say from 100, we want to print to 250 to 350 accordingly, not scattered. We can easily do that. What I'm just gonna say is list1 dot sort, like this. Then right here I'm just gonna print list1. Now once I print it, it's not gonna print it 4, 3, 5, 1, 2. It's gonna print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in ascending order. Now you see now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This also is very useful when working in Python. But now let me just remove this mango. We don't want to have it twice. That was just for testing. But now let's say that we want to print a list from the back. We want to reverse that list. We want to print it from the bottom. What we're going to do, we'll say list2 and dot reverse. It's very easy. We just say list2 dot reverse. And once we print list2, you'll see that it prints it from oranges, then to mango, to apples, and to bananas. Let's run it. Now you see oranges, mango, apple, banana. Now that's how to easily print a list from the bottom, from the last value in that list. But now let's say we want to duplicate a list, like we want to just take this list and copy it again or something like that. Let's test it for list 2. Let me delete this. So let's have another list named list 3. And let's say we want this list 3 to just be exactly the same thing with this, a duplicate of list 2. So what we're just going to say is list 3 can be equals to list 1 or list 2, dot copy. So you're just going to copy all the values in list 2 and then paste it in list 3. Now once we print list 3 and run it, we have exactly the same thing we get when we print list 2. So it's exactly the same thing. And then we can also do something more fun, like let's say we just want to delete the last value from this and just print everything else. We can do that by saying, we can use that by saying the pop method. So we can just say list2 dot pop. So when we say list2 dot pop, it's just going to remove the last value we have in that list. Let's just delete this. It's going to remove the last value we have in that list and then leave the rest. So when I print list 2 now, we should have only 3 values. So now you see we have bananas, apples, and mangoes. No more orange. But let's say we want to be specific, we won't want to delete. You remember that we can just remove a value by saying list2 dot remove, and then we can just specify it here. Let's say banana, and then when we print this, it will remove banana. But we can just also delete or remove a value by using the index number. So in pop, we can just say list.pop, just like pop out, remove something. Let's remove the one with the index value of 1. When we say 1 and print, it gives us banana, mango, oranges. It gives us that same list but without the value of that index number. But we can also do this instead of using pop. We can do this exact same thing, but now we can use delete. So when we say del and we'll say list2, let's say 0. So now this is going to delete the value with the index number of 0 in this list2 list. So when we print list2, it's going to give us everything without banana. Let's run it. Now you see we have apples, mangoes, and orange. And remember that I also showed you how to just clear a list, how to just delete everything in a list. We can also do this using this del function. So instead of specifying something here, if you just say delete del list2, now this thing is going to be cleared, this list. Once I run it, it says list2 is not defined. Okay, but we do have list2 right here. So let's do something like delete list1, yeah, and then let's just print. Oh, okay, so the reason why it says list2 not defined, you can see we have list1. Now here we have list2, which is banana, apple, mango, and oranges. Then what we're just doing, we deleted list2. So once we delete this list2, it's quite different from the one which we did earlier, which was list.clear. Remember that if we do list2.clear, it's just going to remove everything here, but that list is still going to be available in our code. But when we use this delete, it's just going to delete away that list. It's going to delete that variable. So it's not going to be in our code again. That's why when we're now trying to print list2, Python doesn't see it again. It says list2 is not defined. So it completely removes it. So that's the difference between the clear function and the delete function. Now that's going to be all for lists for now. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about tuples in Python. So tuples are used to store multiple items in a single variable. So if you know list, which we talked about in the last part, tuples are very similar to lists, but they have some basic difference, like tuples are immutable. Now immutable means you can't change any value in a tuple. Now let me show you how to write a tuple in Python. Now let's say we have a tuple of 3 numbers. Let's say 3 underscore numbers, and I give those numbers and when you are writing a tuple, it should be in normal bracket, not square brackets. So 1, 2, and 3. So let's say we have this. Now when we print 3 numbers and run that, it just gives us this tuple. But we can also do some things like get the first value in that tuple using the index number. I can say get me 0, which will print us 1. So we can also do all those type of things. But let's say we now try to change the value of 2 to something like 25. It's not possible because, as I said earlier on, it's immutable, which means we can't change it. Once we have the tuple, that's the way it's going to be for our code. We can't refine it or edit anything from the tuple later in the code. So let's say we want to do something like 3 numbers, and I want to say from the index number 1, change it to 23, and then I now want to print 3 numbers. Now this is going to give us an error. So here it says type error, tuple object does not support item assignment. So it's saying what we want to do, tuple doesn't support it. So that's the basic difference between tuple and list. And then we can also do some other things, like tuples allow repetition of numbers or repetition of values. Like I have 1, 2, 3. I can also input 1 again. When I just, let me remove this line. I have 1 twice. Once I print that, it's going to work fine. It allows repetition of the same value. And I can also do some things like I can get the length of a tuple. I can just say print LAN, and then it's just going to give me the amount of values we have in this tuple. As you can see, it prints 4 because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 values. And then I can also check the type just to make sure this is a tuple. Like I can do type to know if this is a tuple or not. Once I run it, you see it says class tuple. So that shows me that that is a tuple. And tuple also allows various data types. Like I can have another tuple and say strings. And then I can say home, land, let me give it one more, earth. Now once I try to print strings, you see that everything works fine. So it allows various type of data types. We can also do it again for like the boolean type. Let's just say BOO, and then let's say true, false, and then true again. Now when we try to print BOO, you see that it works fine. So it allows various data types, and then it doesn't just allow them on separate variables, we can mix them together. Like now we have 1, I can have another one which will be a string, which will be home, and then I can have another one which is gonna be a boolean. So once I print the first one, which is 3 numbers, now you'll see that everything still works fine. So tuples allow all these kind of things. And then in tuples, we can also check the data type of the value of that tuple. Now if we want to check the data type of this first value, we can say type of 3 numbers with the index number 0, which is the first one. So it should print us int, which is integer. So as you see here, it says class int. Now that tuple can also do that. Now instead of just writing this parenthesis right here, or normal bracket or circular brackets, anything you want to call it is totally fine. We can also use the tuple constructor. Just the way I told you about list constructor, there is also a tuple constructor. So the only difference is just that we're going to add tuple right here, and it will have 2 brackets like this. Once I try to print everything, still gonna be fine. Let me just print the tuple variable normally. Now once I print it, you see that it's still a tuple. Nothing goes wrong. Now that's gonna be basically all about tuples, the basics of tuples in Python. So we might be using these tuples less often. In Python, we mostly use lists, but in some cases, we really want to use tuples in Python. Something like, let's say you are working with coordinates or just some numbers that you don't want to change or some values you don't want to change. Tuples might be the best option. In this tutorial, I'm going to be talking to you about functions in Python. So functions is just a bunch of code which perform a particular task. Now functions allows you to package your code well, or let me say restructure your code well. It's just like a block of code which performs a particular task. Then when you want to use that function, you just call it. So let me show you how to do a function in Python. So for us to define a function, we're going to use a keyword called def. Now once we type this def, Python knows that now we want to define a function. So we can say def. Let's just do a simple function which is gonna greet the user, and maybe to say welcome or something like that. So we can just say greetings. So now the keyword which is def, and then after it we have greetings, which is the name of our function. So I can say greetings underscore function. So this is the name of our function, and then it's going to be followed by open and close parentheses, and then after it we're going to have a colon. So after this block of code, Python knows that whatever is going to come below it is going to be the task in which we want that function to perform. So once I click enter, you're going to notice that it doesn't start from beginning, it starts right from this place. Automatically it indents. Now in Python, indentation is very important. So now this indentation shows us that whatever code we're going to write, let's say like print something, is going to be under this function. But if I just remove the indentation and I start from here, then the function is cancelled. This is an invalid syntax because normally there's supposed to be an indentation. And an indentation, one indentation is equals to 4 spaces. So if I go here, you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So once it indents automatically, that means it created 4 spaces. Now let's say you are using a code editor which does the indentation automatically, like if you are using Notepad, and then once you click on enter, it doesn't add the indentation. You can just add space like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then that's automatically indented. So now we want this function to just tell the user welcome or greetings from here, something like that. So we can just say welcome user. So like this function named greetings function is printing to the user that welcome. But if I run this, nothing is done. Let me just close this up. And why is that? So when we have a function, for that function to be performed or for that task to be executed, we need to call that function. And how will we call this function? We can just say, now once I press enter, you see it's still indented, but I want to go out of this function. I'm done with what I'm doing in this function. So I can just press a backspace. Now this is out of this function. Now if I just say greetings function with open and close parentheses, now I'm calling this function. So that means this is just the same thing as everything we have in this function. So now it should print welcome user. Once I just run it, you see now it says welcome user. So that is how to use functions in Python. But functions is more broad. There are a lot of things we can do with function. Now as you can see, this thing says welcome user, the result. But which user? Let's make it more fun, something like that. We can pass in something called arguments or parameters. So right here in this open and close parentheses, instead of just leaving it blank, we can pass in something like let's say we have name. Oh, not this. So name, which is the name of the user. Now instead of saying welcome user, we want to say welcome name. So right here we're just gonna say name, and this is just gonna print welcome name. But instead of name, it expects us to pass in something when calling this function. If I just run this, you see it gives me an error. It says greetings function missing one required positional argument, name. So this is showing us that when we're calling this function now, we need to pass in whoever user that is. So let's say the name of that user is John. So now when I run this, right here you see it says welcome John. So let me just go back and make sure to explain it very well. Right here we have this function. It's having an argument or parameter, which is name. So this name is going to be able to tell the function which user it wants to greet. And then it's just going to greet the user with the print function. So for us to give it this name is just like a variable. So when we're calling the function, instead of leaving this blank like this, we're just going to pass in there a string like John. But we can also pass in other data types. So you can see that this John is a string. But let's say we just want to pass in an integer or a number. And anytime we're dealing with numbers in Python, we don't need the quotes. We can just say 34. Once I run this, you see it says can only concatenate string, not integer. So if you've been following this tutorial from the beginning, I showed you how to convert an integer to a string. So right here it says it can't concatenate string and integer. That means it can't add them both together. So for us to be able to use this, we must make sure that we convert this integer to a string. So I'm just going to say string like this. Now this name is a string. Once I run it, you see it says welcome 34. So that is how to basically do that. Now let's just go back. So let's still make sure we're passing in John. So that is how to pass in parameters or arguments. Now you can call it parameters, you can call it argument, whatever you want is fine. And then we can also pass in more than one parameter or argument. So we can pass in name, we can also pass in age. And then we can say welcome, then the name. And then we can say something like let's do this. You are, then let's type the name. Let's say age, years old, and a full stop. So right here, when we are passing in this John, we can also pass in the age as an integer. Let's say 27. But remember, now this is an integer. If we run this, obviously we're going to have an error, which is cannot concatenate string and integer. So you know that we now have to convert this to a string right here and then run it. So you see it says welcome John, you are 27 years old. So that's how to simply do that. You can pass in two arguments or parameters. Now let's say you don't know the amount of argument that's going to be passed in here. Let me practicalize that before explaining. Now let's say we have names. Let me just remove all these. Welcome name. So let's say we have these, but we don't know how many is going to be passed in here. So we're going to have to put something like asterisk. Now this asterisk is showing that we are passing various amounts like a tuple, which is like a list of values we're passing in here, and then we don't know the amount that is being passed. So let's say right here we have this tuple John. Let's say we also have another one named Tim, and let's give it one more. Okay, right here one more named Tom. So right here we're passing these three values in here as names. So these names is like a tuple now. That's why we put this asterisk, because we don't know. So for us to now show the name which we want, let's say we only want to greet this second user, then we can greet the user using its index number. So we can say names, the index number is 1. Now when I run this, you see it says welcome Tim. So that's how to pass in various values, more than one value if we don't know what we are passing. Now let's just go back. Let me press Ctrl Z, back to name and age quickly. Okay, like this. Yeah, so let's print this and make sure that code is working. Welcome John, you are 27 years old. Right now we can also pass this, instead of just passing the values, we can pass it through the variable names. Now we can see something like name is equals to John, and then age is equals to 27. It's still exactly the same thing. So when we run it, it's still gonna print us welcome John, you are 27 years old. It's basically the same thing. So let's make this more fun. Instead of just passing all these values statically, or by just add coding the values, we can first ask the user to give us an input of his name and his age. Then we're just gonna print that. So let's quickly do that right here. So right here we can say name input, enter your name, and then let's give it another one named age input, and let's say enter your age. So now we're asking the user for the values, we're not just typing these. And then once the user give us this, we're just gonna replace that here. So we're replacing it with name, and I'm replacing this with age. So let's run this. So if I come down here, it asks for my name, I say Tim. It asks for the age, I say 101. Now it says welcome Tim, you are 101. So I hope you get the concept of functions in Python. These are the basic things you are going to be dealing with in Python. In this part, we're going to be talking about return statements in Python function. Now, return statements are just being used to get a response from the task being executed in a function. Now, as you know, in the last video, when we defined our function, then we just simply printed out whatever we want to return. But normally in Python, we use what we call a return statement. So this return statement is gonna like give us an output or give us a feedback of what is being executed. So let's personificate this, right? Let's say you are being sent an errand to go, let's say, get some information, and then when you come back, you want to give a response, or you want to return like a feedback. You want to say what you went to get, what the task which you executed. So that's the same thing right here in Python function. The code block goes for the errand, and then the return statement gives us a response. So let's show you how to do that. We're just gonna define a normal function. Let's just say my function, and then it's not going to take in any argument for now. So in here we just want to return, let's say 5 plus 4. So this basic function now is just simply gonna return 9 because that's 5.4. But now if we can just print out my function. So once we print out my function, you see, wow, it says function, my function, it's just showing us that that's a function. But we also need to add our open and close parentheses. When we run it again, we see 9. Now we can make this like more interactive. We can just have a function that adds up two numbers or subtract two numbers or does something like that. So we can say add numbers, and then want to have two arguments, num1 and num2. So what we just want to return is num1 plus num2. So right here we can just pass in num1 as 2 and num2 as 3. So this will give us, you see it says my function is not defined. That's because we've changed the name to add numbers. We're just gonna run it again. You see now it gives us 5. But let's make this more interactive here. Let's say num1 is equals to input, enter first number, and then let's have a num2, input, enter second number. And right here, instead of saying 2, we'll give it num1, and right here we'll give it num2. So now when we run this, it's gonna ask us for the first number, let's say 80, and let's say 20 as the second number. It's gonna add this up and give us 100. Now right here is, you see it says 80 20, and the reason why it says this is because it's saying this as a string, and so when we use the addition, is seeing it as concatenation. So that's why it just says 80 20. But I want it to add. If I come here and over it, you see it says the string, but we know we are collecting an integer, but Python doesn't know that. So we have to tell Python that, hey, what you want to collect is a number, so I want you to add it. To do that, we'll convert it to an integer by saying int. Then we close it right here. Then we also do the same thing, int, and then we close it right here. Now when we run this, it's gonna add it for us, 80 plus 20. Now it gives us 100. So that's the basic concept of return statement. And I also want to point out something, that whenever we're using return statement in a Python function, we do not write anything after that code block. Like that return statement shows the end of that function. If I come here now and say print hello, once I run it, it asks me for the numbers. You see, it just gives me 8. It just returns this. It doesn't print hello because it is outside that function and it's not on normal indentation. So that code is not seen in our code block. But if I come here, if I delete it and inside the function I paste it, it's gonna print that for us. So let's say 4. Now you see we have hello and then we have the answer of the addition. So that is how to use return statements in a Python function. In this part of the tutorial, we're going to be talking about if statement in Python. So if statement is basically just giving Python a condition. Now this concept is very easy to grasp, not only in Python but in programming in general. There is always if statement, but maybe with different syntax. So if statement is just allowing Python to execute code automatically by itself. So we are saying that if a particular condition is true, then Python should do this. But if it's not true, then Python should do that. So we're just giving Python a condition before it runs the code. So let me first type a simple little note so you can understand the concept. So I can say something like if I write a number. So now I write a number, and then if that number is divisible by 2, then we know that the number is an even number. But if it's not divisible by 2, then it's an odd number. So something like this. This is not how to write code, this is just plain text, but I'm just showing like, yeah, a user wrote a number, then if the number is divisible by 2, then we can tell Python to tell the user that okay, this number is even. But if it's not divisible by 2, then this number is odd. So now let's practicalize this and let's write it in real Python code. So now we have a variable named a, and a is equals to 2, and then we have another variable named b, and b is equals to 3. Now we can have a simple if statement checking if 2 is greater than 3 or 3 is greater than 2, or if variable a is bigger than variable b. So we say if a is greater than b, then we can just print to the user a, let's concatenate, is greater than b. Okay, but here we know that b is greater than a, so let's just make this greater so our code will run. Now let's run this. Now you see cannot concatenate string and all those type of stuff, so let's just convert it to a string. So let's run this again. You see now it says 4 is greater than 3. So we checked if a is greater than b. Now we can also check obviously if a is less than b. Now you see that nothing happens because we said it should run this code only if a is less than b, but since it's not less than b, that code is not executed. Then we can also check if a is the same thing as b. So if a is equals to b, let's just make a equals to b, and we run it. You see it says 4 is greater than 4 because that's what it said it should say. But we can just simply say a equals b. So once you run it, you see it says a equals b. But if we change this now to 3, now 4 is no more equals to 3, it doesn't run. So that's the basic concept of if statement. And we can also do this for different data types. Now let's say we have a string which is team, and b is also team. So now we know that a is equals to team and b is equals to team. So obviously a is the same thing as team. Then you should say a equals to b. When we run it, you see it says a equals to b. Then we can also use the boolean. So let's say true. Now we can say if a is equals to true. That means if a is true, then we can just simply say a is true. And then we can just run this. So a is true. So that's the basic concept of an if statement. But you know, we can also say if a is not true. That means if a is something like false, then we'll say a is not true. So you know now a is false. When we run it, it says a is not true. We can also add two different types, like if, let's quickly change this back to integers. So let's say if a is greater than or equals to b. So you know a is greater than b, or if A is greater than or equals to B, then we'll say, let's just say true or something like that. So let's run it. You see it says true because A is greater than B. And if A is also equals to B, it will still say true because A is equals to B. But now let's say A is less than B. When we run it, nothing is being executed. So now we want to add more functions to this if statement. So it says if A is greater than or equals to B. So let's just check if A is equals to B. Then we'll say A equals B. But what if A is not equals to B? What should the Python do? What should the code do? Should it just not run anything? So we can now add else. This else means if A, let's just correct this, if A is not equals to this. So we're saying if A is equals to B, it should print A equals B. Else means anything except that, then it should just print A not equals B. So if A is equals to B, print this. Then else means if it's not the opposite of that, then it should just print A is not equals to B. So when I run this, now it prints A is not equals to B. So that is how to use a simple if and else statement. We can also do that with like a boolean. Let's make this true. So say if A is true, let's say A is true. If not, let's say A not true. So when we run it, you see it says A is true. But if I change this to false, obviously A is not true. So it says A not true. So that's how to basically use a simple if else statement. But we can also go further. Now let's say we want to add more than one condition. Like if A is equals to true, if A is equals to false, print A is false. Else A is none of the two. So if A is equals to true, it should print A is true. If means we are adding another statement. It's the same thing as if, but else if, that's the meaning of if. So if A is not true, then you can now check if A is false. So if A is false, print this. But if it's none of these two, then just print A is none of the two. So now it should print A is false. When we run it and come here, we see A is false. Now that's how to add a simple else if statement. Now we can add any amount of else statement we want to add. We can say, we can add another one and say if A, let's say not equals to, let's say A, something like that. Then we can print, we can just print anything we want to do. So you can add any amount of else statements in there. That's the basic syntax and way to use an if else statement. But now we can make this more, we can step up a little. Now instead of saying if A is equals to true, so we can say if A is, okay, let me specify a variable. Let me say boy is true, and let me say short is also true. So I can say if boy is true, then print is a boy. Now since boy is true, right here there's nothing like that, so let's just change this to boy. Since boy is true, then we can say he is a boy. But we can also do something like if boy is true, or short is also true. So that means if any of these two conditions are true, it will print he is a boy or he is short. So when I run this, you see he is a boy or he is short. So since both of these are true, it prints this. If this is false, it's still like if we're saying if boy is true or short is false, it's still going to print this. Now the reason why it's still printing this is because or, when we're using an or, it's going to check for only one. So if one of this condition is correct, it just runs this. So when I run this, you see he is a boy or he is short. But if I change this now to and, you see that it doesn't print this. It will print A is none of the two. So let's just remove this else if for a while. So now you see that it prints the else statement, A is none of the two. And that is because when we are using and, it has to check that this and these conditions are both correct. So if one of it is not correct, it's just going to go to the next statement and skip that statement. So that's the difference between or and and. So now that we know the concept, the basic concept of if, else, and elif statement, let's just go ahead and do some simple exercises. Now let's say we want to use if, else statement to check for the data type and then tell the user, okay, this data type is, let's say, a string or it's a list, something like that. Now, first of all, let's tell the user to input something. So let's say value should be input, and then we'll tell the user input a value. Now once the user inputs a value, we're gonna check for that value and tell the user that, oh, this is your value. So we can use an if statement for that. So we want to check if this statement is a string. So we can say if type, if the type of value is equals to a string str, then we'll print, let's just print that value is a string. But let's add an elif. Let's say we want to check if the type is an integer. The type of value is an int, that's an integer. We will print value is an integer. And then we also want to check, let's say if it's a list. So say elif, if the type of value is a list, then we'll print and say value is a list. But if it's none of these, we will just say we don't know. So right here I wanted to add this, but obviously it sees, Python says that I've closed it. So for me to add this column, the quotes there, I have to use the backslash. So now once I use the backslash, this is going to be printed with it. So now we can say we don't know the data type of, then let's just add whatever the user root of value. Now let me just close this quickly and then let's test this out. Now we input a value. Let me input 6. It says 6 is a string. That's nice to hear. Now the reason why it says 6 is a string, because anything we input, automatically it gets it as a string. Now if we want to get this as, let's say, an integer, we'll have to type int, we have to convert it to integer. So this type of exercise only works for string. So now we're changing the name of this exercise to checking if it's string only. So what we just want to do is we cancel all this. We're not checking for int or list or any other data type. We're just checking if it's a string. And that's because Python automatically sees it as a string. And we have to convert it to an integer if Python wants to know if it's an integer. So we can also go further to check if it's an integer by using some complexive statement or some regex, which you don't need to bother about for now. But for now, let's stick to this basic exercise. So we're checking if it's a string. So if it's a string, we'll say it's a string. If it's not, we'll say it's not a string. So we just bring all these to the top. So right here is where this should be. Leave a space, and then let's run it again. Now when I print a value now and I say I, now you can see that it gets that I is a string. So that's basically how to just do it. But if we want to like change it ourselves and say integer, so now anything we input is automatically seen as an integer, so it will automatically say value is not a string. So even let me put 6. Now you say cannot concatenate string, so that's simply because we have to convert this to string before concatenating. Or let me show you a better way to do it. Since we're just dealing with 1, instead of using plus here, I can just use a comma. So when I run this again and input an integer, it says 67 is not a string. So now the second exercise we're gonna do is to check if a number is divisible by 5. So we know that we have numbers multiples of 5, or something like that. That means the numbers which 5 can be divided by. So we have 5 itself, we have 10, 15, 20. But if we give it like 17, we want to tell us that 17 cannot be, 5 cannot be divided by 17, or something like that. So we're just going to automatically get an input first of all and make sure it's an integer. So we'll say input a number, and then we'll say if, let's just, okay, what we want to say now is that if the value so what this is doing is that value is basically the number the user input, and then this percentage sign means the remainder. So we'll say if the user inputs 20, so 20 divided by 5 is 4, then the remainder is 0. So when we do something like 20% 5 in Python, it means give us the remainder. So first of all, let me just cut this out and let me show you what that does. So if I say print 20% 5, now you're going to see that it's going to print 0. It's going to print the remainder of that division. If I say print 22, it should print me 2, because 22 divided by 5 is 4, then the remainder should be 2. Now you see right here we have 2. So let me just quickly bring that back. Right now we're saying if the value percentage 5, that means if the remainder is equals to 0, then obviously that just means that value can be divided by 5, else value cannot be divided by 5. So since we're using an integer, let's add comma here like this. So this should work. Now it gives us a number, let's say 100. Now it says 100 can be divided by 5. Let's run this again and give it a number that can't be divided by 5, like 106. It says 106 cannot be divided by 5. So that's how to build a basic program which checks if a number can be divided by 5. Now the last exercise which we're going to do on if else statement is gonna be the exercise to check if the length of a sentence is less than 10. So again, we're going to collect a value, but this time it should be a string because it's going to be a sentence. Now we want to check if the length of that sentence is less than 10. So if the length of the sentence is less than 10, then we'll say value is less than 10. Else we'll say value is more than 10. So we can just easily do this, and let's type in random things like my name is my name. Now this is obviously more than 10. I hit enter. It said not supported between instance. So because this is not seen as an integer, we can't do this. So right now, anytime we are using this less than or equals to, it has to basically be an integer. We can't do less than or equals to for a string. But there are still other ways we can do this. We're going to talk about it. We could have solved this now, but I'm leaving this to further in the tutorial because I don't want to jump in some steps. So further in the tutorial, we're going to come back to this exercise and I'm going to show you how to do this with strings. But for now, I hope you get the concept of if and else statement. So before we continue with more concepts in Python, we just want to do a simple Python program which checks if a number is an even number or an odd number. So as we know, an even number is the numbers which can be divided by 2, an odd number is the one which can't. So this shouldn't take us up to like 2 minutes to do. So we're just going to collect an input from the user and name it number. We'll say input and we'll say enter a number, and then we want to make sure that this is an integer. And then we're just going to say if number %2 is equals to 0, then obviously this is an even number. So what this is doing is that if the remainder of number divided by 2 is equal to 0, then it's an even number. Else, we just say odd number. Now when we run this, we put a value of like 66. Now 66 is an even number. We run it again and input 67. 67 is an odd number. So that's how to do a simple exercise like that using if statement in Python. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about dictionaries in Python. So dictionaries are used to store data values in the key value pairs. So dictionaries are also data type, just like lists, just like strings. Dictionary is also a data type, but this dictionary stores value in a pair of keys and value. So just like a main dictionary, like an English dictionary, where we have the word as the key and the value as the meaning of that word. So that's basically how dictionary works. Now dictionary, they are changeable, which means you can modify them even after like configuring or assigning them, but they don't allow duplicates. Not like in list or tuples that you can type in a value more than once. In dictionary, you can't do that. So let me show you how to write a dictionary in Python. So let me just name this dictionary my date. How to write a dictionary, we're going to use these curly braces, and then we're going to give it the key. So the key might be something like name, and then I'm going to use this column, and then the value can be team. and then I'm gonna put a comma. I can have another key and value there. Let's say age. Oh no, let me say something like nationality. And I can say something like African, something like that. And then let's just have these two. Let me give it one more and say qualification. And let's say college, degree, or something like that. So this is a basic dictionary in Python. Now let's just start with the basic thing by just printing this dictionary to our screen. What's this? Let's just print my dict. Now once we print this, you see that it just gives us this dictionary: name, team, nationality African, qualification college. But now let's say we just want to print only this name value. We want to print the value of this name. So this is the value and this is the key assigned to this value. That means if we want to get this value, we need to search for this key. Just like when you go online and search for meaning of order or meaning of anything. I'm out of words. Meaning of anything. So for example, meaning of order. So order is the key. Then the value you are looking for is the definition. So that's how dictionary work is very similar to the normal word dictionary. So now we want to get the value of this name. We can just use the square bracket after this, and in there we'll say name. So what this is going to print for us is team. Right here you can see team, which is the value of this name. Now there are other things we can do. As I said, duplicates are not allowed in a dictionary. So now let's say I have two names and the other one is John. Now when I try to print this, you see it prints only the first one. It doesn't say, it prints only the second one. That's the most recent one. It's automatically cuts this one out of it. Now that's what I mean by duplicate not allowed in dictionaries. You can't have two key with the same name, but you can have two values with the same name. Now what I mean by that is this is the key, this is the value. So two keys, we can't have them with the same name, but we can have two values. Let's say this is name 2 and name 2 can still be Tim. Now if I print this, you see that name is Tim, name 2 is still Tim. So we can have the values the same, we can repeat that, but the key being assigned cannot be repeated. It cannot be a duplicate. Now let's say we want to get the length of this dictionary. It's very easy. We are just saying len like this. Then once we print, you see it tells us 4. That's because we have 4 keys and values in here. And then we can also mix data types. Now you know that, let me just remove this. You know that this name, the value being assigned to it is a string, the value being assigned to nationality is also a string, and the value being assigned to qualification is also a string. But we can change it. Let's say we want to add like age, and we know that age will obviously be an integer. We can just add it there. Let's say it's 87. Now the normal way we'll write an integer without the quotes, that's how we're going to write it in there. And then once we print, we can still go ahead and print age. It's gonna print 87 for us with no problem. You can see it right here, 87. We can also add a boolean. We can say is tall, so is tall can be true. And then once we print age, once we print my dictionary but is tall, you see it prints true, so it tells us that okay, this person is tall. So we can add different data types. And then what is very cool is that we can also add a list. So we can add a list of his friends. So we count the data type as a list like this. So we can say one of his friends is Peter. We can say Paul. We can say Precious and other. So right here, once we print friends, it's just gonna print us that list. Okay, right here it says invalid syntax error, and that's because we forgot to add a comma right here. So we should make sure to add a comma before adding another value. So once we click enter, you see it gives us Peter, Paul, and Precious. So now let's just print the whole dictionary without anything attached. Now we go down here, we see that it prints everything, name, team, and everything we need to know about that dictionary. And then to check if this is a dictionary, we can also use the type. So once we just put type here, it's gonna print dictionary for us. So you can see right here it says class is dict, which means that this is a dictionary. So we can also make it more fun by specifying a variable. Let's say we have a variable named x, and we want this variable to be equals to one of the values of this. So we can just simply say x can simply be equals to my dict name. So x now is name. Now once we print x, obviously it prints the name. Now those are basic dictionary functions and dictionary methods. So I hope you get the concept of dictionary in Python. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about while loop in Python. So while loop is a Python feature which allows you to loop through a block of code while a certain condition is true. So let's say you have a condition like if a number is greater than 10, then it should just loop through a bunch of code below. So it's just like a function with an if statement, something like that. So we are giving it a condition, then under it we have a bunch of code which we want to loop through. So let me just show you how to use while loop in Python. So first of all, we can specify a variable named I, and we can say I is equals to 1. And now to use a while loop, we can say while 1 is still less than 6. So this is a condition. We're saying as long as 1 is less than 6, then we just want to print I. I mean, as long as I is less than 6, not 1, I is this variable that is still 1, then we want to print I, and then we just want to increment I by 1. So we can say I equals to I plus 1. So this is just gonna run this while loop as long as I is less than 6. It's just gonna print I to the screen, and then it's gonna increase I by 1, then run it again until it makes sure that it doesn't pass 6, it doesn't reach 6. So you can also increment this by typing I plus equals 1. The same thing, anyone will work. Now when we run this, you see now it gives 1 2 3 4 5. So what happened was that this loops through this block of code. So we said while I is less than 6, so that means it should loop through this block of code. It printed I, then after that we incremented it, then now I is equals to 2. It's still less than 6, that's why we have 2. Then it did the same thing, incremented it, we have 3 4 5. But after that 5, it did the same thing, it incremented it by 1, but now I is equals to 6. So because this condition is already false, I is no more less than 6, then the while loop had to stop. It's just like cutting away from that while loop. So that's basically what while loop is about. It's very important in Python. There are a lot of Python programs you want to build that will need you to use a while loop to loop through different things with a condition. And then you can also do more things like if while I is less than 6, or I is equals to 6, something like this. So now you know that when we run this, it should print us 1 to 6, because it's not more just only when I is less than 6, it's also when I is equals to 6. So now it gives us an error, because when we're using equals to in Python, it has to be double. So let's run it again. So now you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So while loop in Python loops through a block of code at a certain condition being true. So because this is true, one of these is true, it just prints I, increase it by 6, comes back, that's looping, it does that code again, increase it by 6, come back, and then it makes sure that I is equals to 6. Now we can also say I equals to 10. Once I run this, it gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we say and now, and we run it, it doesn't give us anything. So sometimes in while loop, how will I put this? In while loop, conditions is not similar to if statement. In if statement, we can do if I is less than 6 and I is this, then it should do a certain thing. So now you can see that if I is less than 6 and I is equals to 10. So the reason why this didn't run is because at first I is less than 6, so that should run, but we're saying and it must be equals to 10. But we know that I right here is not equals to 10. So if I change this to 10, it still won't run. And the reason why it won't run is because one of these is not correct. So I is not less than 6 because 10 is not less than 6. But we say it's less than 16 now. Then we can run it and you can see it prints something now. So when you are using and or in the condition, when you are using or, as long as one of the condition is true, then that while loop will run. But when you're using and, the two conditions must be true before that while loop runs. So now let's just don't bother about the and now let's change this to 1 and let's change this to 10. So now when we run this, we should get 1 to 9. Let me just expand this. We see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now this is basically the basic concept of while loop in Python. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about for loops in Python. So for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. Now this means it's used for looping over a sequence. And this sequence can either be a list, a tuple, a dictionary, even a string, or a range of numbers. It can be anything that is a list. Now we use for loop to loop through them. Now for loop is very used in Python, is used a lot in Python actually, because most of the times we have lists of data, we have data, large amount of data. Now for loop is used, we can use for loop to loop through each amount of those data, each value in that data. So let me just show you how we do a for loop, or how we code a for loop in Python. It's very easy. Now for you to type a for loop, the first thing you need to do is to type this for keyword, for. Now this keyword shows that we want to loop through something. So we can say for letter in, let's say something like hello. Now this is saying for each letter in hello, which is HELLO, we just want to print letter. Now when I run this, you see that it prints HELLO differently. It prints everything separately. So it's looping through each letter in that hello string, like iterating through the sequence. Now we can also do this by having a list. Now we can say my list, and we can have this list to be anything. Let's just say ji ju jo. Now we can loop through this and say for, let's say like for x. Now note that this can be anything. Let me just, this in which I put letter here, it can be denoted by anything. It can be represented by anything. So when I first got started with Python, I was kind of confused in these for loops just simply because of this letter. So I thought that, since we are using hello and each is called character, H is called a letter, E is called a letter, so I thought we have to use letter for each. But now I just want to clarify that so that nobody will have to go through that confusion. So this can be denoted by anything. If I say for x in hello and I just say print x, it's still going to do exactly the same thing. If I say for ji or for anything I do, it can be denoted by any single thing. Now let me just, so now I just want to say for items, or for values would be better, for values in this my list. So I'm going to remove this string and say my list. Now I just want to print all the values. Now once I press run, you see now it prints everything ji ju jo, which is ji, ju, and jo. So that is basically how to just loop through a list. Now you can loop through anything actually. You can loop through a dictionary. So let's just have a simple dictionary. And then let's say we have curly braces. And then we have name, John. We have age, 13. Let's just leave those two. Now we can say for values in my dict, print values. Now once I print this, you see it says name and age. So it just basically print these two, which we have, name and age. So that's iterating over over a list of values. And then in for loop, there's also something we call the break. So now let's go back to our list. So now we still have this our list, and we said for values in my list, print values. But I can now say if values is equals to ju, then I want it to break. So what this is going to do is that it's going to look through it one by one. It goes from ji, then it goes to ju. So I'm saying once it gets to this ju, it should break, then it should stop that loop. So once I run this, you are going to see, okay, right here it's supposed to be double. Once I run this, you're going to see just print ji and ju. Now why is this? I said that it should continue looping, print all the values, but once it gets into that value is equals to ju, that means once it loops to this ju, then break. Break means stop the loop. So that's why once it gets to ju, it stops. That's why we don't have jo right here. Now we can also, instead of having the break here, I can do something like this. So even before printing values, I can have my if statement, and I can say for value in values, if value is equals to ju, I can say break, and then after that break I can print values. So if you have gotten by now, the difference is that if value is value, so it's looping through these values, but if the value is value, it should break. In the last time it first printed value, it first printed this ju before it broke. But now if value is ju, it should break, before even printing. So it's gonna guess that okay, we have JU, we want to break, then we're not going to print. So Python runs code line by line. First runs this code, then runs this, then runs this, then like that. So the first thing it sees is that we are checking if what we want to loop through next is JU, and we see that yes, it's true, it's JU. Then we just break. Then after breaking, we print values. So the only value we're going to print is JI because we have broken when we got here. So when I run this, you see that I only have JI. We don't print JU again. So that's basically how to use the break in for loop. But we can also loop through a range of numbers. So let's say we have 4 x in range 4. Now what I can just do is to print x. Now once I print x, it's gonna give me a list of numbers from 0 to 3. So it's gonna give me a range of numbers starting from 0 to the last number before 4. So I can also change it to something like 10. It's gonna give me from 0 to 9. So as you can see here, it gives me from 0 to 9. And then we can also specify for it to loop through a particular range of number. So now we're giving it only 10, but we can say it should loop from 3 to 7, or from 10 to 70, or any amount. So if we want it to loop from 3 to 7, this is how we're going to do it. We just say for x in range 3 to 7, loop through this number. So when I run this, you see it gives me 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't start from 0. So it loops from 3 all the way to this 7. Now that's how to loop through a particular range of number. And the final thing I'm going to show you in for loop is that we can also use the else statement. So now let's just loop for a range of 7. So after looping, we can say else. What this else does is that once this loop is done, once it's finished, we can just print finished looping. So now once I run this, it prints from 0 to 6 and it says finish looping. So that's what the else statement does, is that it just simply first of all finish the loop, first of all finish the iterating over the sequence, then it just tells us whatever is in the else statement. So that is an introduction to for loops in Python. In this part, we're going to be talking about to-do list in Python. So to-do list also means two-dimensional list. So it's like where we have multiple lists inside a list variable. So right now, we can have a normal list like my list, which can just have a numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. And once we print my list, know that we're gonna get 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a normal list. But now if we want to have a to-do list, first of all, it's recommended to press enter just to have a nice indentation. Then in here we're going to have a list. So this can be 1, 2, 3, and then we can have another line which can be 4, 5, 6. Then we add a comma, and on another line can be 7, 8, 9. So now this is a to-do list because it has rows and column. This is obviously a list in a list. So this is like the high level list, and this is like the subsections, something like that. So now once we just print my list, you see that it just gives us this normal list. But let's say we want to get this value of 1 or 2. So we're going to get it using the index number. So we know that the index number of this is 0, which is the first one. Then we also want to get the first value, which will be 0. So once we print this out, you see that we have 1. But let's say we want to get the value of 5. So we know that the index number of this is 1. Then what's the index number of 5? It's also 1. Now once I run this, you see now that I have 5. So that's how to basically navigate and like print or get some certain values from your 2D lists. And then we can also loop through this. So I want to introduce you guys to nested loops. So nested loops is where you have a loop in a loop. A for loop, to be specific, is where you have a for loop in a for loop. So now, instead of just printing, let's just say for something like lists in my list. Then it should just print my list. Now once I run this, you see it just prints my list. For list in my list, it just loops through that. But instead of just looping through this or just printing this, what I can do is I can add another for loop in this. So for list in my list, then I can say for maybe the row or the column, for row in list. Then now we want to print row. So when I run this, it gives us an error. That's because in Python we must have indentation to show that this is under this. So let's run it again. Now you see it says type object is not iterable. So for row in lists, we must make sure that everything is intact. So I put list, but the name of this is lists, so I have to add s. Now when I run this again, you see it gives me, let me just open this up. You see it gives me from 1 to 9, which is every single thing I have here, 1 2 3 4 all the way to 9. So that is how a nested loops work. So it's like looping through a loop already. So a loop in a loop. But I've not tried it before, but I think we can also have another loop again and looping through something like that. Yeah, so there are various things you can try out with Python. It's very great. So I hope you understand the basic concept of 2D list and nested loops. So in this part of the tutorial, we're going to be talking about comments in Python. So comments is being used to prevent a particular code or block of code from running with your actual program. Now let's say we have print hello, and then we also have print 1. Now when I run this, you're going to see print hello and 1. Now if I come here and I put an hashtag right beside this like this, you see that this is grayed out. It's no more part of our code. It's still there, but when I run it, it's not going to be run with our code. See, only 1 prints. So that's what comment is for. Mainly in Python, comment is, or mainly in programming in general, is used for explaining our code, or is used for taking down notes in our code very well, like making our code more readable. In Python, you can also just add comment. Let's say you just want to quickly test your code without a particular code block, you can also use comment. So you can also add comment, let's say at the end, like you can say hashtag this line prints hello. So you can just use it to explain your code, or you can just use it to block the code from running. And as you've seen, if you want to comment more than 1 line, you can put hashtag on this line and the second line, then everything will be commented out. But there's also a better way to do this in Python. You can just easily at the, let's say you have a code block, or you have a function like my function, and then this function just prints I. Now let's say you just want to comment out this particular function. Now what you're going to do is above of that function, you're going to add 3 quotation marks like this, and as you can see, it automatically comments all the whole code out. So if we run this now, nothing is gonna run at all. It says we have a syntax error and stuff like that. So we have to close this comment by putting those three codes back under where we want to close it. So we want to close from the beginning of this function to the end. Now when we run this, we will see that print hello and print one run. So now if we try to execute this by saying my want to confirm, you'll see that it's going to give us an error. It says name error is not defined. That means it doesn't even see this part of the code. We've defined the function, but when we try to run it, it doesn't work. So that's what comments are used for in Python. Mainly two things: used for removing your code, or just used for taking notes and making your code more readable. In this tutorial, we're going to be building a basic calculator using Python. So we're going to be using all the skills and everything we've learned in the previous sections, and we're going to be adding them together and then building a simple calculator. So now what we want to do is to have three inputs, collect three inputs from a user, which is the first number, the second number, and the operator. So the calculator we want to build is very basic. It's just the one that is going to add, subtract, divide, or multiply two numbers together. So we want to collect a number, which will be num1, and a second number, which will be num2, and the operator. The operator is whether they want to add, subtract, or whatever they want to do. So now let's define that. We'll say num1 should be equals to input, and we can say enter first number. And then we can also do the same thing and say num2 input enter second number. And then let's say op, which is the operator, input enter operator. So now that we have the three inputs, we're now going to use an if statement. So what is going to happen is, if the op, which is the operator, is equal to addition, then we just want to basically add the first number and the second number. Then we're going to use an elif to get if it's subtraction or whatever. Then we're going to do according to the operator, the user's input. So let's say if op is equals to plus, then if it's equals to plus, we're just going to print out num1 plus num2. So now let's just test that. So right here, let me say 2, 3, and I want to add. Now you see it says 23, which is very wrong. 2 plus 3 is supposed to be 5. Now the reason why it says 23 is because it still sees this as a string. If I overrun it, you see it says string, but it's meant to see it as an integer. So because it's a string, it's just concatenating it together, but we want it to be an integer so it can perform the normal operation. So we have to say int, then in that int we're gonna paste that back there, and we're gonna do the same thing for the second one, int, and paste. Now when we run this, it should work. Enter first number, let me say 75, and second one should be 25, and I want to add. Now you see it gives me 100. It adds it up together. That is what we want to happen. So let's just do some adjustments, and let's say the addition is num1 plus num2. But now we want to check, what if a user inputs subtraction? So if a user say subtract, then we just want to print the subtraction is num1 minus num2, but we must make sure to add this plus sign right here. But as we all know, we can't do this. We can't do the addition is num1 plus num2 because this is a string, this is a number, and then this is a string. So what we can do right now is to just put comma right here. Also we can just put comma. So let's test it out. If I say 17 and 20 and I want to subtract, it gives me the subtraction is 50, which is nice. And then let's do the same thing for multiplication. So we just say the multiplication is num1 times num2. So that's the basic arithmetic for multiplication. And then we're also going to do exactly the same thing for division. So if it's equals to divide, then we'll just print out the division is num1 divided by num2. So now this should work. Now when I run it and I say 60, 20, and I want to divide, you see now it gives me the division is 3.0. But if I do something like the absolute of this, oh no, so absolute of this, let me run it again. Now if I say 60 and 20 and I put divide, okay, still gave me 3.0. I was expecting it to give me 3, but we're going to bypass that. So this is how to build a basic calculator using Python, using getting user inputs and then using if statements, if statement, elif statement. So let's add one more thing. So if the user doesn't input plus, minus, times, or divide, what we want to just tell the user, that would be an else. We'll say print, and we can just say invalid operator. So let's test this out by running it. Let's say user says 60 or 90 this time and 7, and the user now do something like $sign. It says invalid operator. But now let's run it again and test from beginning. So let's test for the addition, 90, 20 addition, it gives me 110. Now let's test for the subtraction. We have 50, we have 70. Let's subtract it, it gives me minus 20, which is the correct answer. And now let's test for the multiplication. We have 40, we have 4, and then we have multiplication. Now it says 160, which is correct. And then for the division also, we have 80, we have 5, we have division 16.0. Now everything is working fine. So I hope you understood what we did by building this basic calculator. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about try except in Python. So what this does is that it prevents an error. So most of the times when you're working in Python, you're going to get a lot of errors. You might do some things and then the program is going to throw an error or an exception. So most of the times this error just stops our program or scatter our program. If our program is running or doing a specific task, once an error comes up, the whole program is down. So to prevent this, we use the try except method. Now this is going to automatically get an error and then just print whatever we want to tell the user. Now for example, when we want to do an addition, we want the user to input an integer. But let's say the user inputs a boolean value or a string or something else. So instead of the Python throwing an exception or throwing us an error, we can automatically tell the user that invalid input, that this is not a string or something like that. So let me show you how to do that in Python. So now let's say I have x is equals to input, let me first say integer to be specific, input, then we'll say input an integer, and then we print x. Now when I run this, once I input an integer, it prints x, it prints 7, the integer. Now let me run it again and input a string. Now you see that it gives me an error named value error, invalid literal for int. So it's saying hjk is not an integer. So we can just automatically get this error by ourselves and then tell the user, instead of Python throwing this exception which can stop our program. So for us to do this, what we want to do, we're going to say try like this, then all this is going to be in try, then after it we're going to say except, then we're just going to print value not an integer. So this try is saying try all this code, then if there is any exception at all, just print value not an integer, or we can just print something went wrong, because we don't know what might cause the exception. It might not be that a user inputted a string, it might be something else. So let's just say something went wrong, please try again. So now when I run this and I input team, now you see it says something went wrong, please try again. It didn't throw us this error like the last time. So that's how to basically use try except in Python. But it's more deep than this. We can use the except method for some specific type of exceptions. If I scroll up here, you are going to see that this exception it gave us is called value error. Now we can say except there is a value error, then say this. This one I'm doing right here is just getting if there is any error at all. But let's be specific. Let's say if there is a value error. So now if there is a value error means the user inputted what we don't want. We're asking for a string and then input something else. Then now we can now say value not a string or not an integer. Now when I run this, I scroll down and input something else. Now it says value not an integer, but it's getting for only this type of error. Now let me try to add another error intentionally. So let me try to concatenate with a name. So right here I'm trying to concatenate with a variable named name, but we didn't have any variable like that before, so it's gonna give me a name error. So when I run this, I input wrong. Now you see, like if you scroll up, it shows me name error, name is not defined. So but if I just put only except and I run, it shows me name is not defined. So this is because we're trying to define something that is not, like a variable that is not there. So that error is from us, which we can pass something like this. But now we're trying to pass an error from the user. We're trying to make sure that the user doesn't input anything wrong. So now we say except value is not an integer. So I hope you get the basic concept of try except method in Python. Now we can also do something like, let's change this back to something went wrong. We can say something went wrong. Now when we say something went wrong, after this we can say else print nothing went wrong. Now what this else is doing is that after running this code, if there's anything that went wrong, you should do this. But if everything went fine, then you should say nothing went wrong. Now let's run this. It asks me for an integer. I input an integer. Now it prints out that integer and it says nothing went wrong. But if I run it again and input a string, now you see it says something went wrong, but it didn't say this. So this else is if everything is successful, if there's no error, then it's gonna say nothing went wrong. Then the last one I'm gonna show you is called finally. It's also a keyword. Now this is gonna run either there's an error or not. So I can just say try except finished. So whether there's an error or not, this is gonna print. I have 7, there's no error, it prints 7 and it says try except finished. If I run it again and I print a string, so it says something went wrong, which is this, and it still says try except finish. So that's just saying that after everything, if there's a problem or not, just print that try except finished. Now we want to talk about reading files in Python. So sometimes when coding with Python, you might want to work with some external files, let's say like a text document or like a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet, or like an HTML file or any external file. So you want to know how to read and write that file. So let's put that to practice. First of all, let's create a new file right here and let's just name it something like, let me save this, and then I'm just gonna save it in the same place I saved this. So let me say all files. This I'm sure is located. Okay, first of all, let's cancel this and make sure we know where this is saved. Yeah, if I come here, yes, so I see where it is saved, project Django tutorial. Yeah, so now I can create a new file and then save it. So right here I can save it as something like countries.txt. So it's ready on .txt. I can just change it to all files. So in these countries, I want to have just a list of random countries. So I can say Ghana, I can say Mexico, I can say Morocco, let me say Spain. I don't have any spelling errors there. So Ghana, Mexico, Spain. Yeah, I think that's okay. Okay, let me add one more, say France. So I think that's okay. So now for us to read this file, we have to like import it into this our Python file. So it's very easy to do. What we just need to do is to say open countries, which is the file name, .txt. Now we need to make sure that this countries.txt is in the same folder as this app.py, so we can easily navigate to it. And then after saying this, the second parameter this is going to take is R. Now what this R means is we want to read on this file. So we want to only read this file, we don't want to edit anything on it. Then there's also something like W. Now W means we want to write on this file, we want to edit this file. And we also have r plus or a. This a means we want to append to the file, so we can't edit in the middle of the file or modify the file or make any changes. We just want to append to the ending of the file. And then we have one more called r plus. This means we want to do both reading and writing, so give us full capability. So that's what the r plus is for. But for this part, we're going to be working only with r. So we are opening this file, and most of the times we always want to save it in a variable. So let's just name a variable file, country file, and then it should be equals to this. So if we print, and anytime that we open a file, anytime we open a file, we always want to make sure that we close the file. So down here we can also say country file dot close. So this is to make sure that we're closing the file, and then in between those we can do anything we want with the file. So now I can just simply print count file. So first of all, I want to check if this file is readable, if I have access to read it. So what I'm just gonna do is to say count file dot readable. Now this is just gonna return a boolean value, true or false. So let me run this. So now it says no such file in directory countries.txt. So let's make sure. So what we're going to do is to navigate into this folder and make sure we create that. So let's go there. I think I have it in right here. So this is in projects, okay, and then Django. So I think I have it right here, and then there is countries.txt, countries. So it says that we can't open, so it says no such file or directory. So what we just need to do is to do something like, let's add this, although this is not the reason why we're having this error. So when we run this, it still gives us that error. So the best thing to do is to just take the main directory to that and then paste it and then hit the slash like this. So now let's try to run it again. Now you see it says it gives us this error. Now the reason for this error is this slash right here. So we're just gonna change all this slash to /, and right here also, and then when we run it again, now you see it says true. So the reason we add that error is because right here it's always in a backward slash, but when you are using in Python it has to be in a /. So now we are successfully navigating to that countries.txt. So when we say print count file.readable, so we're asking it, do we have access to read this file? It says true. So if we don't have access, if we can't read it, it's going to tell us false. But now that it says true, then I think we are good to go. So now that we can read this file, what we just want to do is to print something like, we can say count file.read line. Now when I say this read line, is going to print the first line of this file, which is Ghana. So once I print this, you see now that it's print Ghana. And this is like a sequence. So if I print this file again, if I say print and I say count file.read line again, now what is going to print is the second line. And note that I didn't make any change, the same code, but when I run it, it prints Ghana and Mexico. So I can literally do this and just print everything I have in that file. But the most recommended way is to just say count file.print lines. Now print lines is gonna print everything for you in a list. So it's gonna print everything, all the old lines of you have in that file, and then store it in a list. And now we can just get, let's say, the first one. Let's say we want to get the first one. Now we have only Ghana. Can get the last one. Now you see we have France. So that's how to use the read lines function. And then we can also make it more cool by looping through this. So we can say for, we can change this to a for loop for files in count file.read lines like this. Then we want to print, we just basically want to print files. So now when I run it, you see it just basically print all the old lines in which I have. So the best way to call this is lines, not files. So lines. So when I run it again, same thing, it just prints all the lines I have. Once I come here and make some change, like let me say Ghana is a country in Africa, and then I save it. Once I run it, that change is automatically made. If I move up, you see right here the first line says Ghana is a country in Africa. So I hope you get the concept of reading files in Python. This is how you can read files, read it by lines, read it by text and stuff like that. Now let's move straight to the next part of this tutorial. In this part, we're going to be talking about writing files in Python. So in the last part, we talked about opening and reading files, reading external files in Python. But in this part, we're going to be talking about appending, let's say, some text to the file, or just writing the whole file again. So for us to write a file, right here, we need to change this R to W. So now when we change this R to W, let's just remove this, and then we can just say count file dot write, and then what we want to do is to just write the whole file. Now you can see that this is the file, but if I input something here now, like this is the new text. Now when I run this, you see that nothing happens. But if I come in here, you see that it has been changed. Everything that was there was gone. So we wrote the whole file again. Now this might be useful. Let's say you want to write a new file. It's very useful. So the reason why it wrote everything again was because it was an existing file, so it overwrote, like it wrote on it. But this is mainly used for creating a new file. So let's say we want to have country. Now let me say this is the new country file. Now once I save it and run, if I come into this directory right here in my command, so I'm going to do cd, enter the directory. Okay, it doesn't go to that directory, but what this does is that it creates this new file called country.txt in that directory. So let's go there normally. So right here you see that we have a new file called country. Let's change it and just say new file. Now when I run it, let's remove this space. When I run it, you see nothing happens, but right here new file is created. Now that's how to create a new file and automatically write something inside it. So let's just Ctrl Z back to the countries we were using. So now I have this countries file. Let's say I want to append something to the bottom, like a new text. What I can just do is something like, when I want to append, I must make sure I change this W to A, and then right here, what I'm just gonna do is to just say file.write, then this is a new line. Now when I run this, nothing happens in the terminal, but when I come here, it appends this is a new line to it. But you can see it joined it together. Now let's say I want to form a new line. I want this to be on line 2. I can just come here and I can say \n. Now this is automatically going to take it to a new line. When I run it again and come here, you see now that this is on a new line. So that is basically how to append in Python. Now you can do this for various types, for various file extension. As you know, we did this for the text document, which is .txt. You can even use a Python file to open a new Python file. Now let's put that in action. Now let's say we want to open a new file and name it new.py. And then in that new.py, I want to write. And then what do I want to write in it? So right here now, let me just scroll this. I can just easily write a Python code. I can say print this is a new file. So right here, I just wrote a simple Python code, and then obviously we have to use the backslash before we can write a code. So right here, I use this print this is a new file, and it's gonna be in this new.py. So now when I run this, you'll see now that we have a new.py file. And then I can just, when I come here, I can run new.py. You see now that it just simply prints out this is a new file, which was the command or the line we put in here. So it is also very important and very useful writing the new files in Python. Now we're going to be talking about classes and objects in Python. So I must say that Python is an object-oriented programming language. So this means that anything that deals with classes, objects, and things like that were classified as object-oriented. So classes is just like a feature in Python. Saying something like a function. A function is a feature that Python has. Then classes is also a feature that Python has. But classes now is like a constructor of objects. So you might not understand what I'm saying now, but when I show you on the code, I'm sure you'll get it more easily. So a class is like a constructor of different objects. Under a class, we have various objects. So let's just go ahead and show how to do a class. So now if we want to code a class, we're just going to say class using a class keyword. Then we can say my class. And then under here, we can say x equals to 5. Now we have this class. This is the class. The name of the class is my class. And then we have x, which is an object under this my class, and x equals to 5. Now we want to create an object. This is actually a value, or I can say an attribute under the class. Now let's say we want to create an object using this class. What we're just gonna do is to do something like p1, let's do something like that, equals to my class. Then we initialize it. Then we can say print p1 dot x. Now this is gonna print 5 because we are saying that p1 is equals to my class, which is this class. Then we're just saying print p1 dot x. Once I run this, it prints 5. So that's how to basically print you that. Now let's talk about the init function. All these things I just said, now those are the basic concepts of class, but we can basically use them in real life, let's say in real world things and real world projects. But the init function allows us to initialize different values in our class. Now, for example, we have this class. Let's say this class is named person, and then under that class we're going to have a function. We're going to take two underscores in it like that. Then it's going to have some parameter self. Now this self is going to be there, it's just there, that's the way it is. And then let's say it has name, which we are going to put, and let's say it has age. And then so we put our colon just like a normal function. So let's remove this, and then to determine the name we'll say self dot name can be equals to name. And then we, oh my god, and then we can do the same thing for the age. Self dot age is equals to age, just like that. And then let's just initialize it the way we did here. So p1 equals to person this time around. But now we have to give it this name and this age. So we'll say the name, we can say the name is John, and then the age is 87. Now once we print p1 dot name, you'll see that it gives us John. Okay, so now it says indentation error. So this is under this function, it's supposed to be indented. So let's run that again. Now you see that it prints John. We can also print p1.age, and then you are going to see that it prints 87. Now we can also make this allow a user to input. So we can say name is equals to input, and we can say enter your name, and then we can say age is equals to input, in which we can say enter your age. And then once we have the name and age of the user stored, we can just replace it with this and say name and say age. Now when we run this, first of all it asks us for our name. Let's say Tim 89. Now it just prints Tim 89. So we can also use a class to do something like that. So classes are very broad in Python, and it is very used in Python. But there are still some other object properties that we can do. Like let's say we want to delete a property from this, like we want to delete this age. So let's just remove this, and then let's give it 13 John. Now let's say we want to delete this age from it. What we can just do is to just say del p1.age. Now once we delete p1.age, this is not going to have this age in it again. And then we can just even delete these objects in total by just saying delete p1. Once we run this is going to be deleted. If we try to print p1 after that, it won't work. Now it says p1 name not defined. That's because we've already deleted p1. There's nothing like that, so we can't print what is not there. And then we also have one feature we can use in the class. So right here, let's say we have a class that is named person, and for now we don't know what to put there, we don't know the values, and we just want to continue coding. We can use something we call pass. So this pass allows us to bypass any error. So if we have like this class that is empty, we can just put pass for now, then we can come back to like add attribute. So once I put pass and I run this code, nothing happens. But if I just only put class person and I run, you see it's gonna give me an error. So this pass is just to bypass that error so we can continue with our code for the meanwhile. So I hope you get the concept of class and objects in Python. Now we're going to be talking about inheritance in Python. So inheritance simply means taking from an existing class and then getting all the methods and everything in there and then putting it in a new class. So you're going to understand what I mean in a bit. So let's say we have an existing class in this file named new.py. I just created this file. We actually created it earlier in this video. Let's have a class named student, and then let's say that name is equals to Tim, age is equals to 34, and then let's say gender is equals to male. Now we have this class here. We can easily import it by saying, we can say from new.py import student, which is this right here. So now we are importing student. So instead of saying from new.py, we can just say from new without adding py, the extension. It automatically gets that we are importing from this file. But before we can import, we need to make sure that this new and app are in the same directory. So let me just cancel this. We need to make sure they are in the same directory. So now I have this new class named person. What I just want to do is to just say this is student. So I'm getting everything from this student class which we inherited, and I'm just putting in this person class. So I just put pass to avoid any error. Now I can say p1 is equals to person, and I can now say p1.name, or I can just say print p1.name. Now once I run this, you see it prints Tim all the way from new.py file, but you can see it's running app.py. So that is the basic concept of inheriting in Python. It inherits every single thing which we have in this class, and they just bring it right in this class. So it's like a duplicate of that class, but not a duplicate because different names in different file. So it's called inheritance in Python. In this tutorial, I'm going to be talking to you about the Python interpreter or the Python shell. So the Python shell is an application that is automatically installed whenever you install Python on your computer. So let me just quickly open up my Python shell. So this is my Python shell right here. As you can see, IDL is shell. So let me show you how I open this up. You can just come here and just search for IDLE. If you have Python installed, it should automatically bring that out and just hit open. But since I already have this open, so the Python shell is just like a small environment where I can run and quickly test some Python code. Like everything we've learned in this tutorial, I can easily code them here. Like let me say print, hope you are enjoying this tutorial. Now once I press enter, you see it prints that immediately. It automatically runs that code as I press enter. And we can also set like a variable here. You can say name is equals to Tim, and then we can now print name. But right here in the Python interpreter, we can also print the name without even writing print. If you just say name, it automatically prints it out. But that's only when you're just testing your code here in your Python shell. You can't do that in your main editor. Now we can do a lot of things like I'm sure we can use a for loop. Let me say for letter in Tim. here like that. Then I can just say print letter. Now you see it automatically prints team. I can do anything in here. I can even write a class, and I can say the class should be person, and then I can say name is equals to John, and then right here I can say p1 is equals to person, and then I can say p1 dot name. Now this is just gonna print me John. I can basically do everything I do in the code editor right here. I can have an if statement. Let me say if p1 dot name is equals to John, then print yes it is. So now it's gonna print yes it is because p1 dot name is obviously equals to John. And then we can also perform our basic arithmetic, like 2 plus 3 gives us 5, 9 minus 0 gives us 9, and everything which we can do on the normal place. We can also define a function. Let's say we have a function to say I, and then let it pass a name, and let that name be a name, and then let's say print I name. Now let's say I, and let's give it John. Now you see it says I John. So almost everything which we can do in here, we can also do it in our main editor. It's just like the same thing, but it's not advisable to use this when building normal projects or stuff like that. This is just basically for testing and anything like that. So let's also try more things like try except. So try, let's say age should be equals to int of the input of enter age, and then let's close that. So we want that to be age, and then we just say except we must make sure we have the right indentation. So except it gives us an error because of the indentation, but we can basically do all these right here in our Python IDLE. Is that what I want to show you. So sometimes you might run into all this error of indentation syntax because the indentation is not really obviously clear, just like the way it is right here in Visual Studio Code. So that's why it's recommended to use your normal editor and not basically an IDLE for editing. But I hope you get the concept of a Python shell. That's gonna be all about the Python interpreter. So now we're going to be creating a simple sign up and login system in Python. So we're going to be putting in everything we've learned in this tutorial and then building this simple program. So as you can see here, it says create your account. Now it says we should input username. I'm just going to input admin, and it says we should input password. I'm going to input admin as the password. Now it says user admin created successfully. Login now. So what this program does is that it creates this user. Obviously we're not dealing with real database, we're just storing this in variable. Once we run this program again, we have to create again. So it's just for practices. So once we create an account and it says user created successfully, it says login now. Now when we try to log in, if what we type is the same with this, then it automatically will be logged in. But if it's different, if our username is wrong or our password is wrong, then it will say invalid credentials. Now let me try to log in with normal, and I say admin. Now it says user logged in successfully. Let me run this again. Let me now create another one, admin again, admin. Now it says user admin created and wants me to log in. If I now say admin but the password and I add 2n and click enter, you see now it says invalid credentials. So this Python program we're going to build is going to get whether the password is right or the username is right or not. So let's go straight into that. So let's just quit this, come back here. We can also quit this. So what we want to do, we're going to take in 4 parameters. So the first one is going to be the username and the password for creating account, and the second and the third and fourth is going to be username and password for logging in. So let's do that. Let's say username will be equals to, so this is the first username for creating account, will be equals to an input, and we'll say enter username, and then for the password we'll say the same thing, input, enter password, and then once the user has entered the username and password, we can just print to the user and simply say that your account has been created successfully. And then now we want to tell the user to log in. So let's print again, login now. So now we want to have another variable which will be username 2, should be equals to input, enter username, and then the password for the login, password 2, input, enter password. So now we want to check if this is equals to this. So we'll just simply say if username is equals to username 2 and password is equals to password 2. So this is an if statement saying this and this must be equivalent. That's why we use and. If we use or, it's going to be wrong, because if the username is correct and the password is wrong, it's still going to log the user in. So we want to make sure the two are correct, the two corresponds before we log in. So once it's correct, we can just say print logged in successfully. But if it's wrong, else we just want to print invalid credentials like this. So let's just come onto the top here and print something like create account now. Now this should work. Let's run it. Let's just, so we create a username. Let's just say Tomi, the password Tomi. Now your account has been created successfully. Login now, Tomi, and the password Tomi. Now it says logged in successfully. Let's run it again and try a wrong one. Now let's say hy. Now we now say the username is hy, but the password is ui. Now you see it says invalid credentials. So that's how to build that basic Python program using getting user input and if statements. I hope you understood what we did here. If you didn't, you can just go back in like 5 minutes ago and just watch from there. I'm sure you're gonna get it. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about modules in Python. So modules basically allows you to get the function, class, or everything present in another file. It allows you to implement it and use those same function in your own file or project. So modules is very versatile, it's very widely used in Python. Everybody use modules. So let's say I have this file named new.py. Now in here I have a function named say I, and then that say I function, I just want it to print I. Now I have this function in here. I can import this. I'll just say import new. Now this new is standing as a module for this my file. Now right here I can just simply say new.sayI. Once I say this and run this file, you see that it automatically says I. So that's how to use modules in Python. Now there are a lot of things we can do with modules, and modules are very versatile. So if you want to, like I wanted to use a function that says I, instead of coding it from scratch, there's possibility that someone out there already written that same function or similar to what you want to do and already has it as a module or a library in which you can get and implement. So now modules aren't just on your local laptop, on your local PC like this. Modules are hosted online. So Python has something we call PIP, which I'm going to talk more about in the next video, the next part. So all the modules are hosted online. Let's say you are looking for a module that wants you to just do a specific task, and you know that yes, of course someone else would have done this. Then you can just go and search for that module, or search around, research, then you're going to see that module online. In the next part, I'm going to show you how to implement pip and then install all those kind of modules on your computer. So in this part, I'm going to be introducing you to something we call pip. Now pip is used for installing external modules from the web to your local PC. Now, as I explained in the last video what modules are, they basically allow you to get use function from another file or from another library. So pip allows you to install a module from the internet to your laptop. Now if we go online and then we just search for something like Python modules, then we can just see, let's say let's go to PYPI. So there's a site called PYPI. Now this is where all the Python modules, almost all the Python modules are being hosted. As you can see, 292,000 projects. So it's just basically saying 292,000 libraries or modules that are hosted on this site. Now you can see that each one has different tasks they do. Now see, this module is for Spotify recommendation. Let's search. Let's say we want a module like let's just go to the home page and then let's see what we want. So you can also see trending project, that's trending modules, a lot of different things. And then let's say we want to, let's go to browse, development of framework. Let's just click on this. So now this is the name of a module. Let me look for one that has a description. So Django Deep Serializer. Django is actually a web framework which allows you to build websites using Python. So this one is saying a Django Deep Serializer. So that's what this particular module does. So but how do we install this on our computer? We just type pip install Django Deep Serializer, the way it is being said here. Then how do we now, where do we run this command? If you're on a Mac, just open your terminal. But if you're on a Windows, open your command prompt and then just paste it there. Pip install Django-deep-serializer. Now if this is the library or module you want to use, you can just run this command line and then it's going to go ahead and install this module or this library on your local computer. Now you can see it says collecting Django Deep Serializer, then downloading Django Deep Serializer 0.1 1.3 and all those. So it's setting up all this. Yeah, so you see it says successfully installed Django deep serializer. Now I have this on my computer. Now I'm very sure that if I want to import this, I'm just going to look for how they said we can import it. Just gonna scroll down. Okay, they didn't mention that here because we are not running a Django project, so you don't need to understand what I'm saying for now about Django. But this is how to basically install a module or library using pip on your computer. Now that's what pip is basically about. And this pip, you don't need to, let's say, download pip externally. Once you install Python, pip automatically installs with it. That's why once you're installing Python, it's good if they ask if you want to install all components, it's good to always tick yes and then just add Python to path and just tick everything so that all these components will be installed when you want to use them later. So pip is automatically installed with Python. So if I come here and we just search for pip, you see it says let me say pip Python. Let me be specific. So pip Python is a package management system written in Python used to install and manage software packages. So as I said, pip is used for downloading, or in this case installing packages. So modules are also, we can also call them packages. So pip is the manager, is what downloads it and store it on your laptop or on your computer. So that's the basic concept you need to grasp about pip. So guys, that's gonna be all for this tutorial. I hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. And if you have any question, maybe you're stuck somewhere, you can drop it down in the comments or you can contact me directly. I'll make sure to answer all questions. Having that said, thank you so much for watching and bye for now.